All right, we are live. Welcome to another episode of Monday Night Live on the 10 Horse Money YouTube channel. I got to take a deep breath. I was just telling Dion, I just got back off the lake and it stays light so long. It's nice in the wintertime. It gets dark at 5 and we start these live streams at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. But in the summertime or late spring, it's like you could still almost be fishing right now. And
absolutely,
I kept casting, pushing it, and literally got home probably like 25 minutes ago. So it's good to be here. JB's going to be here shortly. He was at ball practice with his son, so he should be rolling in here in about 5 minutes. And we got a good stream set up for you. Everybody out there in the chat, if you got any kind of questions for Dion, he's the man. He can answer them. We've got that big derby coming up. Be fishing for $100,000. One fish, $100,000. And last fall, it was funny. You were on the stream and you just come out with that Hibdon Hammers jig, and the guy won $100,000 on that jig. I couldn't believe that.
That was pretty cool. Yeah. You don't get that kind of exposure very often. So it's pretty fortunate. We actually made a little video with that guy about a week later, and Lawson kept telling me, he says, "Oh, you know the guy," and I'm like, "Lawson," I said, "I've never heard of this guy, And it ended up being a fella that I used to fish tournaments against when I was a young teenager, like 13, 14 years old. And he used to fish with a cat that I knew named Randy Mosley. And like I say, I've known him my whole fishing career. But to say, he likes to throw a jig is an understatement. I mean, that's his deal. That's the way he likes to fish, and still doing it the same way. Just a really good, slow, methodical fisherman, like my dad was, and stuff like that, so yeah, it was very cool to see somebody win on something that my boys and me kind of created. So,
yeah, I was watching that Squint Your Outdoors show that you guys did not too long ago, and Lawson was talking a little bit about that guy. I think his name's Kevin. Dacey, is that right?
Yep.
And I think the story goes that he ran into him out on the lake or something, and gave him one of the new Hibdon Hammer jigs.
Yeah.
And he caught a bunch of fish on it and went and bought a couple at Baitworks, I guess, and ended up tying that on. We had him on after the stream. It's pretty cool story how he was catching some fish and he's like, well, I'm just going to tie this jig on. I caught some fish on it a couple of days ago, and he ties it on and makes it however many casts and wins $100,000.
Yeah.
So
he was excited about it. He was fired up. And like I say, it's cool to see somebody like that win too. He's just a really nice guy. Been doing it a long time. It wasn't what you would expect out of the bash. It wasn't just one lucky cast or somebody that just put their money up to go try to win. He's actually a very good fisherman and been doing it his whole life. And he's just kind of getting back into fishing a few tournaments and stuff. And stuff and win was pretty cool for him. So.
Yeah, it's good to see somebody that's put their time in. Like you said, you've known him since he was 13 or fished against him when he was really young.
Yeah.
And that means he's been out there putting his time in. What's up, JB?
What's going on?
Nothing, man. We just got her fired up, and we're getting ready to talk some fishing.
Sounds good. I'm only 4 minutes late.
Yeah, you did good, man.
Had to fly, low hover. So.
We were both pushing the clock today.
Did you stay late today?
Yeah, I kept casting,
you
man.
Still smell like a fish.
I know. I caught a lot of fish. I just didn't catch any. I had about a 5-pounder come off right at the boat on a crankbait, and I caught some, some 3-pounders and stuff, and a bunch of little smaller fish, but I just couldn't quite get them dialed in. I was trying to do 2 different videos, and usually when I do that, I spread myself out too thin. I should have just picked one and made it really good. I got one pretty good video and then one okay video, but I was kind of spread out.
As long as you wear the same shirt tomorrow, then you'll be good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of boats out there today. There was a lot of boats out there.
Well, I think so. Today's still
on a Monday.
On a holiday for a lot of people.
Oh, is it? That's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like all the kids are still at school. Like Jackson's out of school all week.
Okay.
So.
Well,
Yeah,
I didn't get on the lake until like 10:30, and I pulled up in the parking lot, and it was full, like it was Sunday.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I said, man,
Yeah,
they must be biting.
my wife didn't have school today either, so
That's what it was then. I was kind of shocked. I was thinking, doesn't anybody work anymore? Jeez.
Everybody's out of school, and then us working people got to go to work.
that's kind of the way it goes around here. When the crappie start biting, everybody's kind of done with that work.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You can always tell around here where when the crappie start biting, you pull up to the parking lot on a Wednesday and it's full. It's like, what is going on? And then it dawns on you that the crappie are biting.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Those suckers were schooled up today. Those crappie. They're any brush pile,
Easy pickings,
any brush pile that I saw with forward facing sonar, there was crappie all over it. I probably could have caught 100 crappie today, but no, I was hard headed and just kept casting for those bass.
Fade, my oldest boy's been fishing quite a bit. And he said, yeah, you can turn around and throw out the backside of the boat and live scope them, or you can turn around and throw at the beach and catch one off the bed. So, and crappie, so they're literally everywhere. So,
Corey's got a question here. He said, only one question. How early should I get to a public ramp as a solo boater for the event to make sure to get a parking spot and get out of everyone else's way quickly?
Well, if you're on Lake of the Ozarks, you better show up pretty dang early. I can tell you that, because and those crappie fishermen, they're pretty eager too. They'll get mad. You get out there and waste too much of their time. They get aggravated. So,
Well, he's probably talking about for the bash this weekend.
yeah. Oh, that's luckily enough. Our water's coming up, so now we got some launch ramps around the lake now. Back during the BFL and even last weekend, there was just not many good launch ramps. PB2 only had 3 holes, so and Tahiti was closed. But they'll be able to use all of those, all the ramps now. Lake's come up a good 1.5 foot, since this weekend. So there'll be plenty of water to put in wherever you want to go. As far as when and trying to get in before everybody, it's the bash. I've seen people start putting in at 3 in the morning. When though you can be out there, you just can't fish till a certain time.
So you can hole sit essentially, right?
Yeah, you can go and set where you want to make your first cast if you want to be sure and be there first. So, and I've heard some pretty wicked stories on people doing stuff like that, but I don't hate them that bad. I would just have to get them later on when it gets daylight and warms up a little bit.
Get in where you fit in, right?
That's right. Wherever there's nobody fishing, it kind of eliminates some of the worry about where you're going to start. Just show up and go where there's somebody not.
See, you're not afraid of those high boat draws, are you?
No, not at all.
See, I always liked a high boat draw on a BFL because that just gave you more fishing time.
Absolutely. They could pair me out last every time. Wouldn't hurt my feelings at all.
As long as they run it like the BFLs do. We've had a couple of the local team circuits. If you get paired out last, they hold every flight 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So you get the raw end of the deal on that one.
Well, English
so.
in Action rolls them out, and BFLs roll them out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Especially
BFL turns them loose like there's something went wrong at the Waffle House or something.
Oh,
Yeah,
dude, Alan Gray.
Yeah, they get them in like I say, like they're gonna run out of waffle mix or something because they want to get to breakfast before the buffet closes.
I know.
Which don't hurt my feelings none. They do a good job. They're they don't have any troubles with their takeoffs, but like I say, they shuck you right on out of there. So if you're in the last flight, you definitely gain more time. That's for sure. But
At the regional at Pickwick last year, Alan Gray was the tournament director, and man, he was like, boat number 91, boat number 92, 93, get on up here, 94, come on up, 95, and then
it's like an auctioneer.
Then he'd take a breath for about 5 seconds, and then he'd pump out about 4 or 5 of them. So you literally got, if you were the last flight, you got an hour and
probably
hour and a half extra time because he was just calling them out.
I forget what it is. It's when I was fishing the MLF tournaments last year, to get 160 guys out, I think it takes them 23 minutes or something like that.
Crazy.
160 boats. So, and never 30 minutes. It's always like 23 to 25, is where they get out of there. And so they want you to have all the time you can have. So.
God forbid there's a fog delay and they get real late to the Waffle House.
Oh man, that just makes for a bunch of grumpy fishermen. If there is a fog delay, just come look me up. That's when I do some of my best stuff. I mean, I am the comedian that take off during the fog delays. There's normally, you just look for the cluster of about 40 boats, all of them tied together, because that's me. Right in the middle of them. Tell some good stories, laugh, joke a little bit. So yeah. And like I say, everybody gets all worked up about that fog delay. I don't want to be out there running around with, everybody getting on plane and running by GPS and everything, because GPS is not radar. It is.
No.
GPS tells you where you're going. It doesn't tell you what's in front of you. So. But,
or who shut down on a channel or broke down.
That's right.
That's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
We've all been in that fog.
Well, you're running in that fog and everything's slick, and then all of a sudden you see a little bit of a boat wake. And you're like, oh crap, is he? Or
that's the pucker moment right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's sure.
Wayne says, do you have the water temp up near Ivy Bend? He said he's dropping in around that area.
In the Ivy Bend area, it's a little bit warmer up in the creeks. You get up in the creeks and stuff, it's in the high 50s most places. There's not a ton of 60 yet, but there's quite a bit of high 50s from what I've heard and everything. So, high 50s to, by then it'll probably be in the low 60s, in a lot of places. So, so that's just kind of the general train of talk I've heard lately.
What area of the lake warms up the quickest typically?
Typically it's the shallow water. It's the dingy stuff. If you get a little bit of muddy water, that seems to warm up faster. Just because the light doesn't penetrate it quite as much, it just kind of warms the surface water up a little bit faster if it's dingy. But like I told you earlier, just not much stained water. Most of it's clear, So needless to say, like I say, that's another thing that's kind of holding it back a little bit, We've had some really nice warm days, and we've also within just the last couple of days had some 30-degree nights, 30 to 35-degree nights, and there was some of them warm, windy days too, here just in the last week or so. But all in the same respects, when it was blowing at night, shoot, it was cold, and the same thing happens to what it takes to warm it up can also cool it right down. It's good to warm up if you get warm, sunshiny days and you get some wind, because it just stirs that water up and it warms up faster and deeper. But the same thing happens if it's at night and the temperature's down in the 30s and you get a big wind. It does the same thing. It stirs up that cold air right back down in the water and it cools things right back off. So we've had kind of a steady water temperature for a while. And now what's affecting it probably more than anything is it's come up about a foot and a half in the last 6 or 7 days, which is supposed to come up by, during this time frame. But it's come up, pretty fast actually. So I think during the bass, you're going to have quite a few more suspended fish than you would normally probably want to fish for. And when I say that, what I mean is even in 3 to 5 feet of water where you really want them to be, if they suspend, that means you still have to fish above him. You have to fish above his head because he's not looking down. Anytime he's suspended in the water column, he's standing upright and he's not actually turned down feeding on the bottom unless you get right in his face. You get right in his wheelhouse where it zips by him or something, then a lot of times you can make that fish chase your bait. But the bulk of the time when he's suspended up off the bottom, he's not feeding down, he's feeding up. He's looking up toward the surface. So wouldn't surprise me to see somebody catch one on a big topwater bait this spring, or a swim bait or a fluke or something that's, just within 6 inches of the surface. And why I say 6 inches of the surface is because if they do make a good move up there and they get in 3 to 5 foot of water like you want them to be, and then he tries to suspend a little bit because the water's coming on up, you still want to fish above him. You want to fish over his head, because you just got a better odds because his eyes are kind of working up. They're looking that way. And, so, big top water, buzz bait, cranking a spinner bait where you can see it, and like I say, just stay kind of above them, make sure you don't fish too deep. You bump that piece of brush or something up shallow or bump it over a log, just don't immediately let it sink right back, keep winding, keep it up in the water column a little bit. And I really think that's what happens. These fish are waiting to move, wanting to move up shallow. And like I say, it's going to happen, but I think it's going to be the perfect storm. It's going to happen right in the middle of that tournament, in the next 2 or 3 days up until the weekend, I think is when they're going to move up. And like I say, I don't know that there's going to be enough time for them to move up and really hunker in and find a good piece of cover, to just say, this is my tree, this is where I'm staying. It's right here by this corner of this dock in this tree. It takes them a while to get attached to stuff. I know that, there's only certain perfect trees that always hold a big one in your area, or a piece of rock or a piece of concrete. There's always those places where okay, every year I catch a big one right there. But the problem with it is this is all going to happen right now in the next few days. And so hopefully they'll get in there, they'll get settled in on a piece of cover, and that's where you'll be able to catch him. But that water coming up the way it is right now, they're not really settling in on anything just yet. Because, as far as they're concerned, they're not sure how fast it's going to come up or where it's going to end up and stop, and they're already thinking about spawning, to say that that's what they're doing. No, it's not. They're not spawning. But it's also on their mind. It's in the back of their mind because that water temperature is getting close. We're just coming off of a real full moon, big clear nights, where that moon is showing all night long. So, there's a lot of things working in their favor to push them to the bed. But now the water's coming up. And them great big ones, they won't get in a hurry to do it until that water level kind of just stops. And when it stops and it gets steady for a few days, then they'll move in there and they'll start thinking about it. But like I say, if you watch your water levels, it's really come up in the last week or so, last 5-6 days. That water level has come up because where I'm working right now, I got to drive across the low end of the lake every day, and the water's come up, like I say, quite a bit. I keep an eye on the water level with my eyes, not necessarily, reading it in the paper or looking at it online. I visually see it, how far it's come up, and like I say, it's come up a good foot, in the last week or so. So
yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, you basically answered it, but I know a lot of lakes, they will wait for that water to come up. A lot of Tennessee River impoundments, they'll wait for that water to fill up before they actually drop their eggs. They'll sit and hold them for a while, and if it's not
everything's for and once again, we're talking about big bass. I'm not talking about 2 and 3 pounders. I'm talking about 5s and 6s and stuff like that. And they've done this a long time. They've been making babies for a while. They're not stupid. They know what it takes. They know what they want to have happen. And like I say, the weather's right, the moon's kind of right, but now the water's coming up. So now they're going to pull up there and they're going to search around a little bit. And you're going to have some people say, "Oh man, I seen a big one today." But yeah, you can see them, but they're not spawning. They're just pulling up there is all they're doing. They're pulling up there, looking around, seeing if there's enough food for them to stay in there on the bank and stuff like that. But they're not going to rush in there. They're going to take their time right now. So
Daniel's got a good question. Did jig sales spike after the bass was won on the Hibdon hammer jig.
Absolutely. It spiked. They spiked pretty dang good. In fact, tickled me to death. Made Christmas a whole lot nicer.
Heck yeah. Hey, how much do you believe that water temperature has to do with the spawn?
I don't, only time I've ever really, now mind you, normally I'm traveling through this time of the year, and I'm traveling all over in different parts of the world. But I really think it's got to do with length of the day more so than that. Because I don't care what anybody says, they're going to spawn the best the full moon in May, and that's just it. On Lake of the Ozarks, that's when the big ones spawn. Now, yep, there's some big ones get in there and move around on the bank, and stuff like that. But really, this full moon is not when it happens. You can see some 2-pounders and stuff like that, but those great old big ones, they hold off. They don't run in there like everything else. It's just like I started to say there just a minute ago, 2-3-pounders, even an occasional 4-pounder will move up there, but they're not really spawning. They're not really standing on a bed. They're just kind of up there looking for places. Those little male bass sometimes will build a bed. They might shine off a spot, but to say that a big female is going to pull in there and use that, even at night and stuff like that, I'm not a big believer. I think our best spawn happens in May, and it always has. I mean, you can talk to anybody else if there's many out there that's got more experience on Lake of the Ozarks than me. You need to point them out. And my dad would tell you day after day, yep, there's a few in there looking around, but they ain't spawning. Full moon in May is when they pull in there and they do it. And then they know just by the length of the day that, okay, it's time. This is when we have them, is right now. And like I say, the bigger they get, the more experienced they are at it. The more times they've done it. Because it's too unpredictable in April. The water's still going up and down a lot of times in April. You have little cool fronts in April that'll come in, cool things off one day, and next day it'll be 80 degrees. They know by May, okay, everything's settling down. Everything's right. Let's get in there and get it done, and like I say, I did a podcast with some guys last week, and they were just sure that they were going to get on the bed. There may be a few, but not the bulk of the big ones. Bulk of the big ones will hold off till May. So
yeah, around here locally, I mean, I was out today and I was looking for spawning bass, and I probably saw three groups. One was probably she was probably around 5 pounds, and then I saw 2 that were about 4 pounds. They were both about the same size. And then I saw a group of some smaller ones. And I looked a lot. Yeah. I covered a lot of water looking shallow. So even here, our lakes are a little bit warmer. They're I saw 68 degrees. I saw 68 degrees.
Say, where exactly is your lake?
Yeah,
this is lower Missouri.
Yes, no, actually southern Illinois is where I was at today. But
it's the same way with Table Rock and Bull Shoals and those lakes. They happen almost a full month ahead of ours. That little dab further south than we are. Yep. Yeah, that warms up to where you could do it this full moon.
Well, in a smaller lake with grass.
Right. Yeah. But I think there's going to be a lot more next month.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, absolutely. Or it's still coming.
Grass is a big factor during the spawn. It warms up. It can warm up faster.
See, I know we're talking about Lake of the Ozarks tonight, but I believe that March, we have a small wave of great big ones that go
around here locally.
And then April is usually April and May are the 2 bigger ones. And then y'all are waiting for this wave of spawners. I'm waiting for the first week of June. You guys can have the spawners. I'll take the first week of June.
Those post spawners.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the ones I like when they get
big
back out
dumb
there.
Post spawners.
Yep. Post spawn is hands down the funnest time to be on the water as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
They're easy. If you can chunk something in the lake that looks like a shad, you can catch fish on it. Don't wear white clothes. You fall in, they're going to eat you.
Good tip. That's a pro tip right there.
Yeah, I mean, don't wear white clothes during the post spawn.
You shave your beard during the post spawn then? Is that what you're saying?
That's right. I actually hide it. I wear one of those neck gaiter deals over it, most of the time. They'll go for your jugglers. I mean, they're not scared. They're eating some of the guns. Once they get post spawn, they've been hanging out and having babies and doing everything but eating, So so when it happens big.
Ken says, Dion, you ever use crappie jigs to catch a bass on a bed?
Off of the bed, we used to use a lot of little tubes and stuff. And there is kind of a little key. There's a little clear shore minnow that they don't ever get really out of the rocks. They stay right on the shore, and we call them glass minnows. And the only time you see him is when he jumps. When he jumps out of the water, he just sparkles. He's a real shiny, clear looking minnow. We call them glass minnows. And there's something about those that on certain clear lakes, and when I say certain clear lakes, we fished one time on Lake Mead, and I finished third in it there. And when you get a real slick, calm afternoon and you get to watching up in those shallows, you'd see those little shiny things just jump around it, and like I say, we call them glass minnows. And they must have something to do with, messing with the beds, because we used to throw a little clear colored tube with a little bit of black flake and maybe just a hint of silver flake in it. But the thing was totally transparent, and it was always about a, good 2-inch, something of about that size. And that's really the only thing that I ever really messed with a whole lot as far as crappie baits. Will a little tiny bait catch a big one off the bed? Absolutely. Anything will catch one off the bed, because it's one of the only times of the season when food's really not what they're thinking about. They're kind of protecting stuff. And I've seen lots of times them little shore minnows just hover all around the bed. You pitch in there and you won't actually see the minnow until you pitch a bait in there, and you'll see them little minnows scatter and run. And like I say, for some reason, they hang out around them beds. And if you'll watch that fish when she swims around, back and forth and, over here 5-6 foot and then turn around and comes back, there's a lot of times that she'll throw her mouth open and throw her gill plates open. And I really think she's eating those little shore minnows. And it's probably one of those deals. Do they do any damage to the bed? Probably not. But it's also kind of like that. Kind of like my potato chip theory, you don't have to want it, but if it's there, you'll stick your hand in the bag and you'll have one,
Yeah.
And that's just a theory I've always had. If it's something that they like and it's around, they'll eat it whether they're hungry, lots of times, so I do know that crappie size stuff does entice them, and standing throwing one on the bed. For every one that you stand and look at on the bed, there's 10 more that's about 5 foot deeper that you can't see, and I've always thought that, most everybody gets in there and tries to look at them and stuff like that. And the biggest ones you can't see. They're out there in that 6-7 foot of water, and you can't visually put a good eyeball on them to fish for them off the bed. That's a wacky worm fish or a Cinco fish, that you're just fishing and throwing out around the back corners of docks and stuff like that. So, to say me and my dad ever throwed at one on the bed here on Lake of the Ozarks, very seldom do we ever do much looking for them. I catch the ones that nobody's looking for, because I know that they get out there a little bit deeper. I know that's where the big ones live, I catch as many fish off the bed probably on a Carolina rig as I do anything. Throw a little light Carolina rig so I don't make a lot of noise when it hits, and I pitch it where I know they live. I've always believed that. I've always, and how many times you're sitting there holding onto a dock, looking at a 3-pounder up there, standing on the bank, and you'll look down by your trolling motor, and here stands a 6-pounder. And you think, oh, did it hear me? Did it see me? Or wait a minute, did it finally get calm enough right here and my boat's shading it from the wind and everything, that I look down and there it is. You know, you're looking at it. Now that's one that lives out there. She's standing out there probably on a bed. You just can't see her good enough to tell. And I've always thought that. I mean, my whole life, you know, and like I say, my dad was one of the best sight fishermen that's ever lived. And very seldom did we do it right here. And it's simply because we knew that's not where the big ones are at. You know, the big ones are backed out off that bank a little ways where they don't get thrown at. So,
you think that applies to most lakes in the nation?
oh, I don't know about most lakes. You know, there's a lot of lakes that don't have the cover we have. The thing of it is with boat docks, that's a perfect cover, you know, for a fish on the bed. That fish can stand in a lot of places under that boat dock that you cannot get your bait to go into that bed. You know, how many times have you looked up there and you see one standing under a walkway? You know, most people can't get their bait in there, you know, or standing under a cable, you know, a cable that's going to the bank, to that dock, and you look up and there's a big shiny spot right directly under the cable. There's no way to get your bait in it from this angle, no way to get your bait in it from the other angle, you know. Well, they're pretty smart, you know, and the bigger they get, the smarter they get, you know. So, you know, I don't think you'll have to worry about that this week. Not at all. You know, I might be totally wrong, and if I am, good job to whoever catches one of the big ones off the bed. But I don't think that's going to happen this week.
I flipped in today. I was just fishing kind of shallow, and I got hung up in this little bit of rock. So I go in there real tight to poke it out, and I'm literally 3 feet from the bank. I get to pop off, and I look over here to the left behind this tree. It's laying down, and there's 2 4-pounders just circling each other right there. And I'm literally probably 6 feet away, and they were just there. And I'm like, holy cow, you know, I wasn't expecting that. So I flipped a little creature bait over there, and I popped it one time, and she grabbed it. I seen her open her mouth and flare her gills, and she grabbed it, but I was up here too high because I popped it up, and I did one of them weenie hook sets, and I just kind of pulled her sideways, and it popped out. And then the wind was pushing me in the bank, so I had to hit the trolling motor, and I blew a cloud of dirt all over that bed. Yeah. And I never came back to them because I don't really. I mean, I'll fish for them a little bit, but I'd rather just be blind casting than catching them. I'm kind of, I don't know. I try to leave them alone. I mean, I know that's a lot of tournaments are one sight fishing. There's nothing wrong with it, but
you can't just say, you know, oh, I'm not going to sight fish, because if you're on the water in the month of May, you're going to be catching them off the bed. Okay.
Right.
Out of this lake, you know, where you all are at right now. If you catch one, odds are, yeah, it's probably around the bed in some form or fashion, you know. And I've done it, you know, I've done it my whole life. You know, I've called them, you know, you go to taking, you know, trying to win a couple $100,000, you're going to do whatever it takes to catch the biggest ones, you know. And anybody who says, oh, I would never do that, yeah, he's a liar. You know, and I don't care who you can be Mr. Oh, I'm a purist, I'm this, I'm that. Now, no, if they throw $200,000 in front of you and say, hey, you want to catch that 6-pounder stand there on the bed? Yeah, you ain't gonna have many of them turn it down, you know. So
yeah,
and like I say, if they say they are, I'd like to meet that dude because he's a better man.
How do you know when one's right?
If they react. I'm not gonna stand here and tell you how to catch them off the bed, because I feel like catching them off the bed is one of those deals that's kind of an art form that not many people know.
Agree.
You know, and I'm not going to teach it because I got a lot of respect for that old bass. Am I going to condemn you for doing it? No, not at all. I could care less. Whatever you got to do to feed your family. You know, I've done it for many, many years to feed my family. But I also feel like I've spent a lot of time in my lifetime learning that. And just because we're doing a podcast, I'm not going to teach everybody how to. Okay? Good luck. Learn it on your own. All right? Now I'll talk to you about fishing like the Ozarks, you know. But like I say, to say I'm going to just sit down and teach somebody how to catch them off the bed, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't guide very often for, you know, I've taken guide trips and, you know, Hey, show me how to catch one off the bed. No, I'm not going to. You know, I've worked way too long learning those little tricks and
Right.
maybe using a little clear crappie bait or something like that. You know, I'm not just not gonna do it. You know, my dad gave very few seminars in his lifetime that had anything to do with bed fishing. You know, but you got to watch fish. You got to know how they act and stuff like that, and you'll know when they're ready to bite. You know, you'll see it. But
Power
anyways,
poles. Power
uh,
poles are very
poles
very
help.
important. I don't have power poles on my little John boat, and
Yeah.
it's hard to like set up on a fish and just keep casting when the
Absolutely.
wind's blowing.
if you can see the fish, that fish can see you.
Oh yeah,
That's very that's guaranteed. If you can see them, they can see you. And like I say, you know, they're not stupid. Them big ones know when that's not the right thing. You know that wasn't sitting there 30 seconds ago. You know, and it makes them weary. You know, so.
When do you think it is important to use products like Spike It on your soft plastics? Is that the same time you use pork chunks?
No, I don't. I don't use Spike It products for the smell. I use it for the coloring my baits, coloring my lures. Um, you know, pork chunks for me is kind of a cold water type deal. And when I say that, it's not that you can't catch them on a pork chunk year round because we used to do it. But always, even way back when, pork was a common deal in your tackle box. You know, I did it basically in that cooler water. I thought, you know, maybe it had a better texture. It stings are a good piece. It's good and lively looking. You don't have to move it around a lot to get a lot of good action out of it. But do I think that, you know, a bass swims up to my tube and goes, no, they don't. You know, they bite your bait because of how it looks 99% of the time. Their sniffers, the last thing they use. So do I believe that Spike It, you know, if Spike It does that, then, you know, most of these bass must be Italian because there's a lot of garlic in that. You know, and the funny thing about it is saltwater fish are exactly the opposite. Saltwater fish are driven by their nose. You know, their nose is how they find stuff. But in freshwater stuff, you know, I just don't think that's a big factor. So, you know, when I use a Spike It pin, it's to make my bait look right. You know, it's to put that little bit of orange on the tip of my claws or a little bit of chartreuse on the tail of a lizard or something like that. It's not to make it smell good.
Yeah. So we got almost 160 people on here, which is awesome. We are going to be doing a Baitworks giveaway, so a $25 gift card, and we're doing a trivia question tonight.
Trivia.
So we're kind of mixing it up a little bit. So we'll ask that question. It's going to be a 2-part question that'll be coming up here before too long. Brian says, do you still throw a black Bagley up shallow to represent a green sunfish?
You know, probably one of the most overlooked sunfish is that little black one with the little blue splotches under his chin. For a flathead catfish, that's the one he wants.
Yeah.
And when I say that, and the crazy thing about it is the bulk of those live on bluffs. They live on great big rocky places. And trust me, it will catch it'll catch anything. But like I say, those little and they're not totally black. They're more of a dark green pumpkin, but they got little tiny bright blue dots about the color of his hat almost. You know, that real aqua bluish green color, and they're real bright right around his chin, under his chin and on his jowls. You see those little blue specks. And yes, I do throw a square lip that looks like that, you know, quite a bit. Especially if I get around them big rocks. I get around big rocks and bluffy type places, I throw it a ton because that's where those bluegill live. Do I throw a lot of square lips that are the color of like a pumpkin seed and stuff like that? Absolutely. You know, I'm a big believer that, you know, when you're square lipping, you're imitating the perch, you know, probably more so than a shad. just because you're dragging it around brush and you're dragging it around things where that bluegill lives, you know. Million different kinds of sunfish too. You know, a sunfish would be like, you know, saying, you know, oh well, they all look alike. No, there's probably 20 different ones in every lake that you go to. Different shades, different colors, stuff like that. But that little black one that person just mentioned, they know what they're talking about. I can tell you that right now, because that is it's one that this fish, I think they must do something to a bass or something, because lots of times they eat that just to kill it. You know, there's no doubt in my mind that they're not necessarily swallowing that fish because they hit it so viciously. You know, the strikes sometimes are just incredible on that thing. And I think it must aggravate them worse than regular bluegill or other bluegills, because them little black ones, boy, they don't like them at all.
Yeah, and then there's, you know, the male and the females have different colors.
Yeah.
And around the spawn, the males are real bright, so you got those color variations. And like you said, that green sunfish around rock, like a black and blue swim jig around rock, is really good because of the green sunfish around those rocks.
But I catch them. I catch them. I take me a box of worms. When I know they're eating bluegill, or when I know I'm fishing around buck bushes, I have taken a box of worms out there with me, and I catch a dozen different kinds. And, you know, I get a consensus of the colors, you know. All right, these are around buck bushes. You know, these are around the rocky places, you know, and most of the time they do have different areas that they try to live in. And, you know, I'm a big believer in finding out what they're eating. You know, what are they chewing on, you know, where I'm throwing my lure. And, you know, like I say, sometimes you got to, you know, take a bobber and some, you know, number 6 hooks and you know, maybe a box of night crawlers for about 10 minutes, and you'll know what they're eating. You know, it don't take long to figure it out. So,
well, and that just shows the importance of matching the hatch, and that's one extra bite for $100,000 that you're fishing for.
It doesn't hurt anything, you know. Get out there, you know, just like you're saying right there, match the hatch. You know, they ask me year after year, you know, well, how would you practice for the big bass bash? Well, one thing, I wouldn't jerk it many at all. I would not jerk a lot. And the other thing is, I'd put me on a pair of rubber boots, get out there and turn over some rocks, catch you 2 or 3 of those crawdads, match your jig up, make it look right, you know, because you know, out of 3,000 people that's in that deal, ain't many of them out there turning over rocks. You know, ain't many of them going to take a little piece of worm and go down there and catch a few bluegill around the boat dock to see what color they are, you know. And you know, I mean, really look that stuff over. You know, the neat thing about it is, through companies like Skirts Plus and some of them, you know, you can match your jig to anything nowadays. You know, they have scale finishes, they have bar finishes and stuff like that on this silicone rubber that you can make your jigs out of. You know, your trailers, you know, there's a million different colors in your trailers. You know, you can match up just pretty much to anything that swims in the water. You know, we used to put out a little thing with Skirts Plus that was a little kit, you know, that had like our 10 favorite tab colors. And, you know, we would mix and match, and, you know, and we wouldn't match them up. We would look at them, you know. It wasn't no accident, you know, my kids carrying around a little Snoopy pole and some little tiny hooks. You know, I'd tell them, hey, take that bucket and go catch me 2 or 3 bluegill. And they'd immediately run down to the bank, you know, and catch them. And next thing you know, they come up there and they got a whole array of what they're going to eat, what the fish are going to eat, you know. And it makes a difference sometimes, you know. Makes a difference.
Fly fishermen do that all the time. They'll go out there, turn over a rock, and look at the little bugs and kind of match them up.
They watch them deals, you know, hatching out on the surface, and they catch them mayflies and stuff, and they look them over, and the next thing they put in the water, it looks like one, you know, simple as that. So, you know, it don't hurt nothing to know what they're eating. So, and it ain't always swimming in the lake of what they're eating. Sometimes it's falling off of trees and stuff like that. So, you know, you just got to use your head. You know, you're dealing with a big bass. She's not stupid. I mean, she's not stupid. And when I say what I said about not jerking at them, you know, I think you get 2 or 3 good shots at a dominant bass, a season, and I really believe that's it. I don't think I think they sew up and don't bite after you catch one, and I don't think it's days. I think it's weeks, and that's just my opinion of it. They just don't, they don't give it up too many times if they have a little stupid spell and eat something they're not supposed to. They know they know what looks good. They know what looks right. They live down there, so take your time, make your stuff look right, and make it work right on the bottom. I think most people work way too hard at colors as much as they should work about what it's doing. What your lure's doing when it's in the water. These glide baits in the last 4 or 5 years have gotten so popular and everything. Why they work? They look like a dang gizzard shad. Yep. They're as good a mimic as a gizzard shad can have. And it's basically because it goes through the water just very slowly. It's not just a from side to side jerking like a spook does. It's more of a just come paddling through the water. That's a gizzard shad. It's not, and little shad, their tail just does this behind them. So that's kind of a Kitech kicking tail right there. All right. But that's little shad. That's the smaller ones, the ones that are 2 inches. Them big gizzards, they just kind of go back and forth. They weave back and forth through the water. And like I say, some of those glide baits, you can't imitate it any better, and so, you just got to think about that stuff. One of the best color glide baits is that solid white one. It's not one of them beautiful painted up ones. No, it's white. And that's because it's doing the right thing. The way it looks when it swims through the water, I bump my spinnerbait into things. I don't just throw a spinnerbait out there and wind it in, I bump it into stuff. I flare my rod, I'll wind it along real easy and then I'll give it one of those, and you make them blades kind of flash, you bump into a tree, just pump that thing one time and then let it go down and then take off winding again. You bump, you throw a zoom fluke. A zoom fluke is one of the most natural looking things you can throw in the water, because it looks like an old bluegill just kind of pacing along, but if you're doing this and you're jerking it back and forth and it's dodging back and forth, when do you ever see a bluegill doing that? You just don't most of the time. Most of the time, they're just poking along. They're just barely swimming along. And then they swim up to something and they stop. There's lots and lots of times that my target bait is a fluke type bait. I pitch it out there next to a target and I just let it sink to the bottom just ever so slowly. Think about what a fish sees. It sees that bluegill kind of nosing up to that wood a lot of times and just kind of standing around it, just kind of gliding around. But it's not a lot of erratic back and forth. Like, the reason you do it is because you can. You think, oh man, that looks really cool, the way that thing's dodging back and forth. That style of bait is one of the best fish catching lures out there, and 99% of the people work it too much. They do too much with it, and it becomes unnatural looking to a fish a lot of times. There's lots of times my fluke, I throw it out there and I just wind it in real slow. Just wind it just patiently, just give it about that. And as it comes to you, it just kind of barely does that, just easing along. A Senko, guess what? Possibly never been a more fish catching lure ever thrown in the lake. Yep. And guess what? Most people try to work it. Throw it out there, let it sink. Because when it sinks to the bottom, that little tail just sits back there and wiggles as it goes to the bottom. And that's what triggers them into biting it. They swim up there to it, and it looks like, a fish standing in the water, but then as it's going down, you see them little tails just barely kicking in the back. And that's natural. It's what they're used to seeing. Real subtle movements, is what a lot of these fish look at and what they see. And, that's what triggers them into biting. Sometimes you can twitch it, dart it, dodge it, make it jump through hoops, do all that stuff, and you can catch them. but there's lots and lots of times you're really overworking your stuff. It's just not looking right. Throwing a jig, you throw a jig out there and you go to pulling it in, and 99% of the people throw it out there and here's their rod. Their rod goes, they lift it up, take up the slack. Lift it up, take up the slack. Then when they do pull it up and they pull up against a rock, like, oh, there's a rock. Then most everybody reels down, gives a little tug, gets it to jump up over that rock and go right on. I can only imagine that most of the time when a bass finds a crawfish, where's he finding? Hiding next to a rock.
Mm-hmm.
Let your jig set on the bottom. I mean, you're throwing a jig with a rubber crawdad on the back of it. Let that thing, you finally pull it up against something, just pull it up there, let it set. You don't have to let it set for a minute. I mean, just let it set for, 4 or 5 seconds. Because if a bass was following it, that's what he's used to seeing. He's used to seeing it kind of back up to that rock in order to try to hide. And if you pull it immediately up over the rock and keep on moving it, that's kind of unnatural to that fish, There's a few things, that go in and out of the water that are really natural looking to a fish. Why do you catch them on a shaky hit? It's because of how it stands in the water. Okay, where your jig's at and where your lead is on the bottom of it, and then you got a long straight tail worm on the back of it. It's head down on the bottom, dead on the bottom, and it's shaking. Okay, that is a minnow feeding on the bottom of the lake.
Yep, I agree with that.
That's the perfect food for a fish. For one reason, it's not paying attention. It's feeding on the bottom. It's not looking up and it's not standing up there looking around and like, oh, there's a bass. No, it's on the bottom feeding. That's the ultimate food for a bass. He's not looking. He's not looking. That minnow or whatever is feeding on the bottom, and it's not expecting to get eaten. And that's why it works so good. It's just a natural thing for a bass to see. Carolina rig, got the big old lead sinker dragging along the bottom, kicking up silt off the bottom. And then about, that far behind it, here's a zoom fluke or a lizard or a French fry, another little minnow just kind of coming along behind, eating out of that silt, whatever's kicking it up, It's just the natural food chain in motion, and it's one of those deals. It looks natural to a fish. When you and I look at it, we're like, oh, well, your sinker's way out ahead of it. So that's just keeping it down on the bottom. No, it's making it look right. When a bass hears that sinker down there clicking and clanking on the bottom and he runs down there, something's kicking up a little dust off the bottom. And like I say, 1.5 feet, 2 feet behind it, here's a little minnow swimming along eating it. It's just a natural thing, Same way with an A-rig. An A-rig, when shad get busted into, you never see 1 or 2 swimming back to the surface to get back in that group. You always see 4 or 5 little bunch, swimming back to try to meet back up and cluster back up into that school of shad. That's why an A-rig looks so natural to a fish. And you're dragging it up. You're going up. Well, it's going up to gather back up with all of its buddies, all of the shad that just got, trashed into. So the reason it catches lots of fish, it looks right. It fools the fish, just by how the motion it's using and the way it's going. I drag a jig a lot on the bottom. I drag it along real easy because every time you raise your rod tip up, you're pulling it off the bottom. You're pulling your bait up off the bottom. And I don't care how slow you lift your rod tip. You lift your rod tip up, you're pulling your bait up off the bottom. The crawdad don't make that motion. He crawls along the bottom until he backs up against something, So every time you raise that rod tip up, you're actually pulling that bait up off the bottom. Now, anybody out there right now is thinking, oh, well, that's how I do work mine a lot of times. Guess what? On any given day, you can catch them on anything, and you can catch them doing the wrong thing when they're biting. It's when they're not biting, that you got to really focus on, hey, am I doing the right thing with my bait? Am I working it too much? Stuff like that. I could talk to you guys for weeks about how to catch them when they're biting. That's a waste of time because you guys already catch them when they're biting. The way I'm trying to tell you is how to catch them when they're not biting, and that's the ones that all of us need to learn about, and I'm no different than anybody else, I'm still trying to figure it out, still trying to learn, day after day, but, and I am particular on my baits, I'm really, my bait's going to look right. It's going to look like a little crawdad on the bottom, and I'm going to take those spike it markers and I'm going to paint it up just right, just so. When I throw a fluke to look like a bluegill, he's going to have a little bit of orange and red up here on his chin. He's going to have a chartreuse colored tail, everything in the water's got kind of a natural camouflage to it, dark on the back, light on the belly. So, make your lure look that way. You have lots and lots of awesome color selections. Think about what the fish are eating, think about how it looks, so just take your time, put a little bit of common sense in it, and that'll show you exactly what to catch them on, Everything has a lot of camouflage to it in the water. So that's why green pumpkins work good. It's because your water's green most of the time. The slime on the bottom is brownish green. The rocks are brownish green. So, think about that when you're rigging your lures up, real obscene different colors sometimes will catch them. That's normally when they're biting. When they're biting, they'll eat anything. Why else?
You mentioned
why else would they eat a bubblegum worm or a yellow worm?
I know.
There ain't none of that out there swimming around,
Oh.
But
I want to touch on something before we get too far away from it. You talked about the different things that bass eat that aren't necessarily crawfish and shad. There's random things that enter the water from land. And your dad was a guide for years and years. And back in those days, it was very common for people to keep what they caught and clean them. Anything that you heard your dad talk about in a bass's belly that was kind of odd, or anything you've seen over the years that was kind of out of the normal?
Oh, there's lots of different things. You get a little bit of fresh rain, a little bit of run in. There's, how when you walk out in the yard after a good rain, you see them night crawlers laying around on concrete and stuff like that. Everybody, they come out. I don't know if they get, too much water and they feel like they're going to drown, or I have no idea why they do it. But, rocks are the same way with night crawlers. They come out on them rocks. I get a good rain coming into, let's say, Table Rock, or here, even on Lake of the Ozarks in specific areas that are primarily running off of rock. And I'll throw a very natural colored worm. I'm talking night crawler looking worm in that area, because and mark my words, next time you get a good fresh rain, you go watch where that water's running in, and you're going to see a certain amount of night crawlers, floating around, and little tiny worms and stuff, lizards, bugs, stuff like that. You never see a whole lot of lizards in the water, but there are, salamanders and stuff like that. And apparently it is kind of a rare deal, because when they really get to biting one, it's pretty impressive. You can really catch them on them. French fry type baits, those are just little stray minnows, little brown minnows, different colored minnows and stuff. Think about when things are small, fry type stuff, different colors of fry and everything. You just gotta put a little bit of thought into, what is there and what's possible for them. Do they eat snakes? I have caught them with snakes, in them, little ones and stuff like that. But they're just little teeny tiny things for the most part. Birds, I know they eat birds. I've seen them eat birds. Little ducks and stuff. A lot of the birds that they eat a lot of times fall in out of nests and stuff like that. Little featherless, creepy looking dudes, I've seen them bust them, there's all kinds of stuff. And especially if you get a good rain. You get a good rain, anywhere there's a run in, there's lots of fresh food, and new and different kinds of food. And that's why them old bass will flock to those little run-ins a lot of places. In between almost every one of these giant houses on Lake of the Ozarks, if there's an actual dip in between two of those houses, that's a run-in. You know, that's where water is going to run out of that yard and out into the lake. And you know, just watch for that stuff. You know, those little run-ins provide a lot of different kinds of food every now and then. I don't know. I mean, I've seen every kind of fish that swims in a bass's mouth. You know, I've seen them choke on catfish. I've seen them eat white bass. I've seen them eat crappie. There's nothing that swims out there that the bass won't eat as far as what's swimming in the lake with him. They eat each other, you know, very frequently. You know, all those little bluegills, they all eat them. You know, so really there's quite the array that can happen, you know. You get them bushes in the water and stuff like that, you know. There's nothing, you know, nothing that can't fall in out of one of them bushes, you know. Why else would they eat a brush hog type bait, you know? It doesn't look like much, you know. But to me, that's kind of a bluegill oriented bait, you know, because you got a big mass of rubber, which, like I say, and then it's actually swimming down through there, those two little legs following it. You know, so that's a bluegill style bait to me. You know, a tube, I hear a lot of guys talk about a tube. Oh, well, that's a crawdad. No, it's not. A tube doesn't no more look like a crawdad than I do. A tube is a swimming fish. You know, that's a little bluegill is what it looks like more than anything. You know, or a minnow. Like I say, I don't think they turn down, you know, a lot of minnows, you know, and when I say that, minnows of every color. But like I say, a green pumpkin tube with a chartreuse tail on it, that's a bluegill. Simple as that, you know. But, you know, there's just lots of things that's, you know, you give me a second, I can explain to you why they eat it, you know, for the most part. You know, just like we talked about that bubblegum worm or yellow worm, I don't think they necessarily eat that because it looks good. I think they eat it because it's just so obnoxiously different that they will jump and grab it, you know, you know, a lot of the time. And I think that's why you don't hook them quite as well. You know, if you think about it, when you're throwing a floating type worm, you have a lot of bites, but do you land 50%? Think about that just a little bit. Next time you're out there and you're fishing, there's you miss a lot of those fish. And I think it's because they're not eating it to eat it. They're eating it just to kind of kill it, you know. Okay, that's not natural. I got to take that out of the gene pool. And they jump and grab it and they try to crush it, you know. It's kind of like throwing a whopper plopper. You throw a whopper plopper, most of your bites on a whopper plopper are not to eat that bait. They're to kill that bait. And that's why some of the strikes are so vicious. You know, you have very few fish that eat that lure that eat a topwater like a popper or a spook type bait where they just come up behind it and suck it down. Okay, that's one that's eating it. That fish is intending to swallow that bait. Simple as that. A plopper, yep, it moves along pretty fast, but even when you're stopping it and you're hesitating it and you're not working it, you know, and throwing big water, almost all of your better days that you have on that style of bait are when you're cranking the heck out of it and it's really throwing lots of water. And like I say, mark my words, you're missing a lot of those fish also because they're not really hitting it to swallow it. They're hitting it just to kill it, you know, and it's just you know, you just got to think about those things, you know, and certain lures, they eat them to eat them, you know. A little brown jig that's about that long right there, yeah, he's swallowing that. That's going down the pipe, you know. When he picks that up off the bottom, there's no hesitation in his mind. That's going down the goozler. And, you know, same way with the shaky head. There's no missing it. There's no letting him run with it. No, when he bites a shaky head, jerk. Because it's going down the pipe, you know. Same way with the fluke. 99% of your fluke bites that you get, guess what? That's natural to that fish. It's going down the tube. So, you know, you don't You don't have to entice him into biting it most of the time. Most of the time when you get a tug on that type of bait, it's you got him. You just gotta think about that stuff when you're out there fishing. You throw something that doesn't look like a shad, or if it doesn't look like a crawfish swimming on the bottom, then odds are, he's hitting it out of aggravation sometimes, or because it just went whoop right here in front of his face and he jumped and lurched out there at it. I really believe that a lot of fish actually look at their baits, your lures, a lot closer than you think a lot of times. I think there's a time in that fish's, there's a lot of times they're very aggressive and they hit it out of instinct and, oh, it looked right, Well, I think there's a lot of times they look at it and they're like, oh, there's something not quite right about that. And they turn away from it, It happens. It happens with topwaters. It happens with spinner baits. It happens with everything you chunk in the water. Just every now and then they run up on it, and then at the last second they're like, oh, wait a minute, something's not quite right. And they turn away. I try to make my lure look right. I try to think about what he sees. What's the last thing he sees before he takes a hold of it, And a lot of that has to do with, that little bluegill's tail just kicking along. It's just wiggling along behind this little mass that's about that tall, just kicking along. What color's the tail on a bluegill? Chartreuse. It's as bright as it can be, Last thing he sees when that crawdad sticks them hands up in the air as if to ward him off is them tips of them claws. And they're almost always a brighter color than the rest of the body of that fish or the rest of that crawfish, So, buy you a couple of those, Spike It markers, and Spike It don't pay me nothing. I buy them just like you guys do. I mean, color that stuff up a little bit. Just make sure that the last thing he sees before he swims over that thing and grabs it is what it's supposed to be, and a shad is one of the biggest misconceptions. How many of you throw a shad colored bait with a black tail? Not very many. You know why? We don't make one. Nobody makes one. They just, if it's shad colored, it's just got a gray back and a white belly. That's it. Well, guess what's the last thing he sees on one of them shad's tails that's wiggling out of his face? That little black tail go right out through there. Mm-hmm. Right before he goes, whoop, is that black tail right in his face, Take a Sharpie, same one you sign autographs with, and put a little bit of black back there on that tail, the wiggling part. Very seldom do I throw a Kitech in the water, a little Kitech in the water that it doesn't have a black tail, And I know you don't have them because they don't make them.
Yeah.
And overall, fishermen are pretty lazy about thinking about that stuff. You know?
I used to do that with fluke. I've gotten away from it, but the blue Spike It dip, I would just barely touch the tail of my fluke just to give it that darker tail.
You just got to give him a reason to get a hold of it. Used to be lots of firetail colors and stuff like that. And my opinion of firetail colors are giving him something to zero in on. Okay. It's making him zero in on getting a hold of something. But like I say, a chartreuse tail on the back of a watermelon fluke, that's a bluegill, And the only way you can make it look better is if you put a set of eyeballs on it. And trust me, I have the paint. My fluke goes in the water. He's got a set of eyeballs. If it's a shad color, he's got a shad dot on him, and he's got a little dark tail. Why make him turn it down? You pitch a Cinco out there. That's a swimming fish. That's a bluegill, or that's a perch that's actually kind of dying or falling slowly down beside a tree or something. Put a little dab chartreuse on it. Like I say, that little orange gill plate up here on most everything's got a little bright color right up here on the chin. A set of eyeballs. I mean, I believe, I paint my stuff up, You see my baits that are in my boat that I fish with during the tournament day, they're going to look like a fish. They're not going to just look like I stripped a Cinco out of the package and put it on a Texas rig and throwed it out there. If I did, they're biting. Yeah. If I did, you better do the same. Just strap it on and get to slinging it because they're eating it. But when they're not eating it good, my stuff's going to look right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna look like what they're eating, and makes a big difference to me.
I mean, that's something that forward facing sonar has showed me even today. Fishing a crankbait, I'm reeling a crankbait in, and I'll see a fish come at that bait 4 times faster than the crankbait is going. Swim right up to it, stop, look at it, and then turn away. You know, sometimes they'll hit it, but that's been going on since the creation of
he had that
fish.
aha moment.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
He swam up there like, oh, that looks
right,
funny.
and that's
like,
that's
wait a minute. Hold on.
That's always been going on. We just haven't been seeing it, but now
Yeah.
you can see that it happens, and they'll follow it. Those fish will follow it for 10 seconds, not just a jerk bait. You know, I always thought something that's pausing, they're getting a good look at it. Something that's moving, they're still getting a good look at it because they're expending the energy to follow it and look at it while they're moving. And if it don't look right, they'll peel away and just move on.
Yeah.
You know, we never knew that was happening until until we started being able to look at them and see it happen. But it does happen for sure.
Yeah. Oh, it's, you know, my dad didn't finish high school, but he was the most intelligent human being I was ever around, ever. And 99% of it all makes sense. If you just give it a little bit of thought, it makes sense, you know. And you just got to keep one thing in mind. You're messing around in their territory. They know what looks real, you know, and they know how it swims through the water. They know how it jumps through the water, you know. Yes, on occasion you will fool them with something that does something really, really crazy or makes a crazy noise, you know, and sometimes it works, you know, like some of these new swim baits and topwater baits, you know, that one with the little metal deals on the side that goes like this, flaps back and forth.
Yeah.
What the heck? There's nothing in the water. Will one bite it? Absolutely. You drag it too close to him, but that's one of them lures. He's not biting it to swallow it. He's biting it because it's just freakishly different, and he'll whack at it, you know, and try to kill it and stuff like that. But it's not necessarily the one you want to be throwing on Derby Day because guess what? He's got no plans of putting that down his throat, you know. And I'm sure I've just offended somebody that, I throw that bait all the time, you know. Guess what? That's not why they're eating it most of the time, you know. We better get to a question.
That best bite on a topwater is that one that just kind of slurps it in. It just kind of disappears.
Or
like
the one
like
that just sucks the bottom out of it. Just
that's the one they're eating it.
Creeps up underneath it, you know, and because they're thinking about, wait a minute, how do I get a hold of this so it goes down the windpipe? You know, that's all they're thinking about, you know, is, wait a minute, should I take it from the head or should I get it from behind, you know?
It's that frog bite where the mat just falls out from underneath that.
Yeah.
Frog.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Tim wants to hear a story. Tim says he'd love to hear.
I've been talking for an hour. What are you talking about? Story. Story about what? Be more specific, Tim.
He says he'd love to hear Dion tell a story about him and Stella practicing together all week for the 97 Classic.
I tell you what, I worked hard at that one. My dad couldn't go down because he had made money there before, and my wife was busy with the kids, and so Mom says, well, heck, I like to fish, I'll go with you. And I like, load up, let's go. And went down there for 6 days. And, you know, you're in July in Alabama, you know, hotter than blue blazes. So I rigged her up a little umbrella back there she could sit under. And God love her, she went with me every night, every day, never missed a day. And I told her several times, I said, Mom, I can come back and get you at noon or something, or get you, you know, bring you in at noon or something. No, I'm good. Needless to say, the first 4 days that we fished, my mom's an excellent fisherman. I mean, she can fish slow with the best of them. And I'm talking jig, worm, stuff like that, fishing out deeper, Carolina rig. And the first 4 days that I spent on Logan Martin Lake, I tried to catch them deeper. Every tournament that we fished there had been one deep, you know, and I wanted to find every good deep spot that I could find. Needless to say, in the first 4 days that I practiced with her, I never caught a bigger string of bass than she did. Not one day. Now this, you know, after about 4 days, I'm starting to think, hey, this is starting to wear on my attitude a little bit, you know. Here this old lady sitting in the back of the boat fleecing my butt, you know, and, you know, at that time I was only a Well, no, I wasn't even a world champ yet. I normally throw that out there. I'm a 2-time world champ. Surely I can catch one. Well, guess what? My feelings were hurt after about the 3rd or 4th day. And so I told her, I said, Mom, I said, next 2 days, I said, I like to fish boat docks. And I said, I'm going to fish in boat docks pretty hard to see if I can win off of them. She said, sure, go right ahead. Do whatever you want to do, Needless to say, she sat in the back of the boat with a Carolina rig. And on the 5th day, when she fleeced my butt, and I fished boat docks the whole time, I thought, wow, this is embarrassing. I'm going to have to really bear down and backboat my mother to see if I can beat her actually on the last day that I get to be on the water. Needless to say, the last day I did. I mean, she even commented about it about noon. She said, man, you sure are trying hard to not let me catch one. I'm like, guess what? I deserve one day at least, And needless to say, I fished all day long, had me about 16, 17 pounds, a big old spotted bass. And I thought, yeah, I'm finally going to get her. Day 6 is mine, and right before we went in, she caught about a 6-pounder dragging a worm in front of that damn boat dock, and ended up giving her about 18 pounds. I'm like, son of a gun, 6 days in a row, and I still didn't beat her, But what was cool about that was one of my best friends, he calls me on the way home, and he says, hey, I'm having a get-together Saturday, come by the house. We're going to cook, and a bunch of the boys are going to be there, and we're going to just have a family day. And I said, okay. I said, I'll probably be able to do that. That'll give me a day to rest, and then I'll come over. And he said, yeah. He says, I heard you was going to win the Classic. I said, oh, you did, huh? I said, who'd you hear that from? He said, oh, hell. He says, everybody knows it. And I'm like, really? Well, that's good. Glad y'all know it. I said, I'm not so sure, And they said, oh, yeah, your mom's been telling everybody if she can catch them, that surely, I can catch them good enough to win, And, oh, yeah, she'd been telling her friends when she called and talked to them and everything. Yeah, by the time I got home, everybody was just sure I was going to win.
Well, she showed you exactly how to do it.
She showed me exactly how to catch them, But the last day I spent on the water with my mom, she caught about 28 pounds on Lake of the Ozarks during the spawn last year. Oh, yeah. She ain't no chump. You put her around them and she knows how to catch them. But anyways, yeah, we've had a good time. She's, how she's put up with the Hibdons as long as she have is beyond me. That's for sure. But yeah, she's a good old gal.
What do you like to throw when there is a heavy mayfly hatch going on? It's kind of a random question. I like that. I like the random questions.
I tell you what, a lot of times it's a topwater. And it's not really, it's basically because of the way everything else is eating. Them bluegills come up there and they just pop up underneath them things and just suck around on them and stuff. So a lot of times I throw a little popper and whatever Zell's sponsor was, Rebel. At one point in time, their popper, they also made a small popper. And it's about half the size. And I can remember when I was growing up, I used to throw that a ton. And I've got a couple little bluegill colored head and chuggers that are a little bluegill color. And I tie little brown tails on them, to mimic them bluegill, eating those mayflies off the surface. So I throw a little popper quite a bit when that's happening.
Yeah, more times you're not imitating the mayfly as a fly fisherman would. You're imitating the bluegill, the shad, anything that's feeding on those mayflies.
Yes. Yeah, you're imitating the next person in the food chain.
Kevin said he got to talk to you at the Bryant's Osage Outdoors in Laurie, Missouri this past weekend. He says,
yes, sir.
Thanks. It's good talking with you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing. You hang out around tackle store, you're going to get to talk fishing. And that's kind of right up my alley. I'm kind of big on talking about fishing.
No.
What about Tim? What's Tim?
He's impressed with your beard game. He said the beard game is strong.
Let me tell you something. I went guiding the other day. Here's a little funny deal. I went guiding the other day, and I had 2 guys in the boat with me, and one of them sitting on my my glove box. So I couldn't get my glasses out, and to greet them off of their boat dock, to take them, they just immediately set their stuff in the boat and plop down and ready to go fishing. And I didn't realize my beard was too long until I took off without my sunglasses on, and it got to getting in my eyes. It got to coming up there, you know, it's up there all in my face, and I'm like, holy crap, I'm gonna have to stop or I'm gonna run over something. And then one of the guys looked over at me, he's like, "You all right there, big fella?" And I'm like, "No, my beard's gonna kill us right here, bigger than everybody." I said, "You gotta get up." And he gets up, and I get my sunglasses out and put them on, and yeah, I'm getting a little out of hand. I'm gonna have to shave a little bit, but
I get every once in a while I'll be riding around, I'll feel something like a bug's tickling my Adam's apple down here. It's my goatee, and I'm like, I'm doing that. I'm like, wait a minute, that's just my goatee, like tickling all the way down there.
Yeah, wait a minute, that's me. You know,
that's me. That's just me.
I tell you what, though, it's a lot of fun. My wife teaches elementary special needs, and I play Santa Claus every year. And let me tell you something. One of them little kids looked at it and they're like, "That's not real," you know. And what's funny about it is about half of them can't hardly talk. They're so young, you know. But they'll look at that and they're like, "That's not real." And then one of them little girls will reach up there and she'll go, and she's like, "Holy crap, that's him," you know. And it's just like immediately I turn into Santa Claus, you know, just out of the blue, you know. And you know, I wear the suit and everything, but yeah, the beard's all me. And like I say, you let one of them little youngins reach up there and grab hold of that beard and they can't pull it off, then it's on them. And the neat thing about it, as soon as you set them down and get the next kid, that one just immediately goes and runs and tells everybody else, "Oh yeah, that's him right there. That's the real deal right there. That is the man." And then your answers about what you want for Christmas become real serious after that. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I got a joke. I want to tell you before I forget it. I just want to tell you, it's I heard this over the weekend. It's an Easter joke. We're still around Easter, so if I don't tell it now, I'm gonna have to wait a whole nother year. My father-in-law, he's a master joke teller, but there's these three guys. They go up to heaven, and they're sitting there at the pearly gates in front of God, and God says, "For you to make your way in to the pearly gates, I want to know what each one of your thoughts are of Easter. What is Easter about? And exactly how is Easter? What is Easter?" So he asked the first guy, "What is Easter?" And he's like, "Oh, this is easy. I know Easter. Easter's when this guy dresses up in this red suit and he's got this sock cap with a white ball on it. And he flies around with these reindeer and he throws all these Christmas presents underneath the tree in the morning and the kids wake up. God pushes this button, zoom, just sucks him right out of there, right to hell. Just shoot, he's gone." Second guy, God says, "What is Easter to you?" He says, "Oh, that's when you buy these chocolates and these hearts and you buy this real nice card for your, significant other, and you might send some flowers and stuff." Shook, just sucks him right out of there. So he's looking at the last guy. He's like, "All right, sir, what is Easter?" And he's like, "I know exactly what Easter is. Easter's when there's Jesus and they put him up on the crucifix and they put a crown of thorns on his head and he died, and then they put him in this cave and they put a big stone in front of the cave, and then 3 days later he rolls that stone over and he goes outside and he sees a shadow and he turns around and we have 6 more weeks of winter." It's like, shoot, just suck it right down. That's my Easter joke.
Oh Lord.
Let's talk.
We have reached an all-time low on this.
We have reached an all-time low. Yeah.
What's the next question? Somebody come up with something.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Chris has got one. If you were fishing a big bass bash this weekend, would you focus on secondary points or more docks and banks?
Well, my theory on it is, if you throw at something obvious after about the first 2 hours of the day, you're fishing behind other people. I fish a lot of really unobvious stuff. Everybody thinks if they do think about spawning or something like that, that's all pea gravel and those type of banks and stuff like that. I'm a firm believer that they spawn everywhere, and they try to spawn everywhere. I would probably, lean more towards odd looking banks, banks that not everybody's fishing, I would at some point in time take off down a bluff for a little while, just to try. I wouldn't just run to the back end of every creek that I came to. You can fish shallow and not be up in a creek or not be up in a cove or not be around a pea gravel pocket or something like that. Shallows, whatever's close to the bank, wherever you're at. But to me, I always feel like that those fish are up on the bank right off the get go in the morning. One thing about the bass and bob deal, is it lets us know how they've been won in the past. And 99% of the time, it's the first period is when it gets won 99% of the time, or the last period. Now, yes, everybody says the last period. Well, they might have saved it all day long, and that's true. That could very likely be true. But I also think that in the mornings they bite a little bit, and then they start suspending. They start pulling off of that piece of cover, and that's when you catch one where you throw down the side of a dock or something like that, and you come winding your bait back, and the fish bite you 5 foot from the boat, but 20 feet away from the dock. And I really think that a lot of those fish pull away from cover, just because too many people, too many lures, stuff like that. So, I try to tell my son, the only son that I have that can legally fish, to give everything a little bit of room. Give all of your targets a little bit of room. Just back up a little bit. Give them a little bit more room. Work your lure further away from that piece of cover. A lot of times I still like to throw to a piece of cover or something, but I also want to give him a little bit of space in case he's pulled off and suspended a little bit. And that's always been kind of my opinion of it. They go through that middle part of the day where there's just so many people and they've seen so many lures and everything. Well, what do they do any other time? They either hide better or they suspend and they don't eat, one of the two. So keep that in mind with your lure selection, what you do. I would probably, as the day wore on, start throwing like a swim bait a little bit more, or a fluke a little bit more type bait. Maybe even throw a Senko out there at the front of the docks, or throw it out and around piles of wood or brush or something like that, Throw a bait that just not everybody else is throwing. Just try some different things. Because I truly believe that when they suspend in shallow water, they become very hard to catch. So you're either going to have to throw something that they won't turn down, or you're going to have to make sure you keep it in his face somehow. And like I say, the only way you can do that is to use something that doesn't go quite as deep, or sinks very slow, or something that you can control the depth pretty much. I would have some square lips on and stuff like that, and maybe hold my rod up. Hold my rod up at about this angle, and crank it in. That way it never gets to its maximum depth of 3 foot, try to keep it up there in that foot and a half type stuff. Used to catch a lot of fish on a man's 1-, and it's nothing more than it's one of the better baits at keeping within about 6 to 10 inches of the surface, and it's just, if you throw a chatterbait, just make sure, after you come over that piece of wood or something, maybe hold your rod up instead of slowing down, I would vary my speed as much as anything, on what I was doing. And I would just try to find a rhythm that, that you're getting a few bites doing, because like I say, you're going to hit on the perfect little scenario and it's going to work. There's nothing that we do differently as professionals that you guys can't do for the most part. It's just the fact that we keep trying different stuff. We don't beat a dead horse. If this doesn't work for a little bit, we try something a little different. I either pick up the pace or I slow down the pace. But I keep trying different things, and that's what you got to do. You got 3,000 other guys out there trying to do the same thing you are. Mix it up a little bit. Try some different stuff, throw stuff and don't do what you're supposed to do with it, there's just lots of different ways of varying how you would normally do it, and like I say, you're going to land on the right thing, and shoot, you're going to be like Donnie Snelling, and you're going to weigh in 7 or 8 of them, through the day. Donnie Snelling had like 9 checks last year, by the way.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, almost every hour he made some money. But anyways, it's just he got all the right little niche of what was making him bite, some better fish bite. And you just got to keep trying different things. I really think a big one's going to come on a topwater this year. I really think that in the springtime one, which doesn't happen very often, I think this is going to be the year when a big topwater probably, catches one of them 8-pounders.
Well, that was going to be a question I had for all of us. What do you think that the big bass is going to be one on what bait? If you had to pick one bait, last year you said it was the jig, and it was. So you still going with the jig this year, or are you thinking something else?
I think it's going to be. I think fish are not. Can you catch them on a jig? Absolutely. You have to throw something that you're comfortable doing for the most part. Okay. I don't know you guys that well, but one of you's got something that you're really good at, and the other one has something that he's really good at. Guess what? In 2 days of fishing for one bass, one big one, you're going to have to be throwing something you got confidence in, because you're going to catch some fish. You need to be catching fish. It's been one on a shaky head a couple times. Well, that guy came here from Texas and one on a shaky head. Well, guess what? A shaky head will catch a fish, and it'll catch a small fish. But when you throw it in front of a big one, he'll bite it too. So you kind of have to be throwing something you really know, and have confidence in. I throw a topwater bait a bunch, and I like throwing a topwater bait. And I can throw one all day long when most people can't, just because I know if I get a bite, it can be a giant, and I really believe it'll be some sort of topwater, because the water's so clear too. This lake, this lake right now is super, super clear. So that's the way I look at that. It's super, super clear. So a fish can travel 3 or 4 foot deep up to the surface in a blink, and especially to eat the right kind of topwater, and the right kind of topwater might be a bluegill looking bait. It might not be a shad. It might be a bluegill. It might be a crappie looking bait. Something of that nature. Do I think it'll be one of these new glide baits or a big swim bait? No, because I think everybody pounds them to death. I think it'll be a good old fashioned Zara spook or a buzz bait, but it might be an odd color. It might be one that's just a different color than everybody else is thinking about. But I think the tournament will be won in the top 1/3 of the water column. Let's put it that way. I don't think it'll be won below that, unless somebody does whack one in the first few hours on a jig. Now, mind you, my other theory is, I put my bait where most people don't. And when I say that, we fish in the fall almost every year, the week after the big bass bash, and the reason that the Hibdons do good in that tournament is because we focus on places that not everybody gets their bait. And when I say that, if it's a boat dock that you can barely fit your $70,000 bass boat in between, guess what? That big bass bash, they probably didn't fish that spot that hard, because most of these guys won't take their bass boat into stuff like that,
Yeah.
And I try to focus on stuff like that. I think about where probably not many people fished in there, and instead of playing where a fish should be, I play where a fish has not been thrown at, and that's my way of thinking on that. And this big bass bash would be the same way. I go for the first couple hours every morning and do exactly what I thought I could catch a big one doing. If that's a jig, then it's a jig. If it's a jig throwing out a piece of wood or throwing out a piece of rock or something, that's what I'm going to do. once I get through that first couple hours and I know, man, I'm following people down this bank, then I'm going to start focusing on, like I say, the top third of the water column, and start relying on some of those fish being suspended around cover, and that's where I'm going to start fishing.
What do you think, JB? What's
Spinnerbait. I'm going to go spinnerbait.
Dang,
Big,
that's what I was gonna
big
say.
bladed spinnerbait.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Just because of the time.
Time of the year. I think they're going to have to find some muddy water, some dirtier water, some off-colored water, maybe up in a creek somewhere. But you're going to have
there's only 2 creeks. Niagara and the Glaze. That's it.
There you go.
Everywhere else is clear. I know because I've been in every one of them. I have been from Truman Dam to Bagnall, and there's 2 dirty spots. That's the Niagara and the Glaze. And I'm not saying that's not where it's going to be one, because there's a ton of people catch them out of the Glaze, and there's a ton of people catch them out of the Niagara. So, but for the most part, unless we get some rain sometime this week, that's the only dingy water there is. I mean, it's there's a lot of those creeks up the lake. You get up there and you're normally catching them out of 2 feet of water. Well, you can see 4 and 5.
Right.
So, and that sure hurts your chances on 5-pounders. If they can see that far, and that and they're not used to it either. They're extra spooky in them places right this minute because they're not used to it being this clear. It's crazy. But that's just me thinking about it. I'm about opinions. Everybody's got one, and
Right.
and mine is there's not enough dirty water to go around. Let's put it that way. So I feel like you're going to have to catch one that's not, you're going to have to, somebody's going to catch one somewhere that ain't dirty, just because there ain't enough of it.
Right.
The Glaze and the Niagara, they're going to have some traffic lights installed before the weekend, because if not, I mean, there's going to be, and this is something that not many people that they get to talk about, this big bass bash. Be careful going in and out of these coves.
Yep.
You're not talking a 200 boat tournament. You're talking 3,000. Okay, everybody's in a hurry to get to where they're going. They're running in and out of these little coves and pockets and stuff. Just be careful. I mean, be careful and watch what you're doing. Because it's really, you take 2 bass boats running at each other from opposite directions at 70 miles an hour. Guess what? You're there in a hurry. You're in a blink, that person is on top of you. And, so just be careful while you're out there. Slow down, just like it's a highway, just like you're crossing the street. You get to the mouth of one of them coves, slow down, look both ways, But anyways, that's my opinion. I think that's what'll win, And you're right. A spinnerbait's a good way for one reason. You can control how deep in the water column you are, and that's a good way of doing it. A chatterbait might up and do it, And the reason I say that is because if you watch MLF, if you watch the Elite Series, everybody's into a chatterbait right now.
Right.
Holy crap, they throw it all over the world, and
well, that's what led me to a spinnerbait versus a chatterbait, because everybody's throwing a chatterbait.
Everybody's throwing a chatterbait now,
Yep.
But
I'm going with shaky head. I'm going with the shaky head just because I was going to go spinnerbait, but I'm thinking shaky head gets a lot of bites. And like you said a while ago, a big fish will suck it in just the same as a small fish will. And I think some sort of I'm not going with a worm, like a trick worm or whatever. I'm going with a Cinco style bait, like a 5-inch Cinco style bait.
Shotgun shells.
Shotgun shell. Looks like a little minnow digging around on the bottom. And I think there's going to be a 7.5 pounder that's going to see that little minnow. It's not paying attention. He's going to sneak up behind it and if there are some fish that pull up on a bed, that's a great bait to catch those bedding fish.
Good a way as any to catch one.
Yeah, it's deadly.
I can tell you right now, I caught a bunch of fish the other day on a Carolina rig. I mean, a number of fish, and that's going to do nothing but get better. And that allows you to fish the bottom a little bit quicker than most, so.
Jay needs a partner this weekend.
Here, how luck on this fat cat, Jay?
He was wondering about Stella.
Yeah. You might talk her into it. I don't know. She might go. She's gonna piss you off. I can tell you that. You're not gonna feel as manly as you do right this minute when she's done with you. I can tell you that right now. Yeah, she's gonna bleed a lot of that eagerness out of you.
What couple more questions. What part of the lake do you think it's going to be one at?
Oh,
what section?
I think it'll be one from the new bridge probably to the Hurricane Deck Bridge.
Okay.
So I'm encompassing the dirty water in that. You know, I like fishing way on up, and I have this spring already. And I'm just going to tell you right now, that water being that clear, those are boogered up. Those are not, it's just not easy by no means up there. Can you go catch some up there? Absolutely. You can catch them anywhere on the lake because they are moving up. They're moving to the bank. But those are going through another problem, and that's that clarity of that water. You know, they're used to seeing about 6 inches in front of their face. And right now, they got a lot of visual stuff that they're not used to up there, you know, and I just think them big uns are going to be a little bit more sheepish out of that type of situation. You know, but the whole lake's good. I mean, you know, I get asked that question much anything. Well, where would you fish? Well, like I say, I would probably surprise you where I fish, you know, because I don't like being around people. I'm overall an older, grouchy human being, and so I try to stay away from people, but you can't in this instance. So you know, I might be on some banks that everybody looks over and they're like, "Wow, right? You kidding me?" You know, and that's the kind of stuff I would, you know, hunt down and look for. You know, a lot of times after that first couple hours.
John's trying to hit you up if he wins on the Hibdon jig. He wants to know what day are you going to take him fishing?
I did the last guy.
Yeah, you did.
The last guy that won, I went fishing with him about a week after that. So you win on it and you say it. I'm there, dude. I'll take you. We'll go anywhere you want to go. So
what are you throwing on your sea rig? Your Carolina rig? Daniel wants to know.
The lizard.
The lizard?
Yep. But I'm a big fan of a fluke on one too. I throw a fluke on one a lot.
I need to do that more. I need to
throw a Carolina rig more.
Yeah, I know. It's a deadly bait. I go in cycles.
A fluke on a Carolina rig, that's a deadly apparatus right there, boys. It will catch them when most things won't. Anywhere. I mean, I have, you know, I throw it anywhere on the planet too. I'm not afraid of throwing it. My roommate Peter T, you know, he made a living with that stuff, you know, with a fluke on a Carolina rig, and I'm a little mojo rig. Well, we call it a PD rig. You know, when you put a little bitty old 16th ounce weight out in front of a fluke and work it around real slow and stuff. And when I say real slow, Peter T is probably the only human being that has the pace of a Guido Hibdon, you know, and makes it work. I mean, makes it work. So
I heard you say on that Squinchers Outdoors, you were talking about if your dad had spot lock back then.
Oh yeah.
How he would never move because you said he already fished so slow. If he had the capabilities of spot lock to just stay in one area and drive you nuts.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my dad had polio when he was a kid, so he didn't get around that good. You know, his legs didn't work as good and stuff like that. And, you know, you get one of them old windy days when the wind's blowing you around and stuff. You know, if my dad would have had spot lock, he would have dominated the earth. I mean, God would have called him back and said, "Hey, I need to feed these people over here." You know, and come on, that's a God joke. You know. Nobody got it. Went right over their head. You know.
I got it.
You know, I'm sure Peter, Paul, and Guido was in there somewhere back in the day. You know, because my dad could catch them where nobody else could. But yeah, you know, he wouldn't have needed live scope. He would have dominated with spot lock alone. But you know, and that's a deal. You get a bite, you know. you get a bite from a big one sometime before this bash, and you just know, man, that was a big one. Give it an hour. If you think there's a giant lives there, give it an hour. You two can't do it, I know, because hell, I can't do it, and I know that you could. That's impossible to do. I've had lots and lots of times where I thought, oh my gosh, that fish was so big, if I could just get it in the boat. But it's hard to spend 45 minutes to an hour throwing at the same object if you don't get it to bite. But we do some different things too. We change angles. There's lots of times I'll scoot in there and get my bait unhung or something, and then I'll turn around, make 2 or 3 casts back out. Make a couple casts at a piece of cover by throwing out. A lot of people don't think about that, but you change your angles up sometimes. He might not be facing the way you want to bring your lure through there. So that's kind of the deal with that. Change it up, go at a different angle.
That's huge. That angle's huge.
Well, with current and wind, what I learned on Kentucky Lake, current and wind, you put those two together, and that current, what you thought was running north and south, east and west, whichever way your lake lays, a little bit of a breeze can turn that current just a couple degrees one way or the other, and that fish is now sitting facing the other way.
There, you see it in grass fishing a lot. That if you head one way down a patch of grass, you'll miss a lot of fish. You'll have a lot of fish bite you, but and what's happening is you're pulling the bait into their face from the wrong direction. You're like coming from behind them, and they'll blow up on it, but they're not getting a good enough look at it to really get it. And you turn around, you go back down the same grass line, and everyone that bites you going the other way, you hook every one of them. And it's because you're ambushing them a lot of times, because he's facing the wrong direction, and you're dragging it up and you're spooking him. It's coming over the back of his head, and he's just lurching out there to try to get it. And he's not getting a good eyeball on it before he actually makes an attempt. So we change angles a lot. I do that a bunch. If I get a pile of brush where I know there's a few fish or two, I'm going to give him 2 or 3 angles on that piece of brush, and that's not because of live scope. That's just the way you got to do stuff, throwing at a log or something, laying on the bank, change up, get in there close to the log and pitch out it, sometimes, or, just, you got to think about how that fish is looking, where he's facing, give him a couple different looks at it.
Yeah, definitely. Let's give away a Baitworks gift card.
3,000 people. Guess what? 90% of the casts that he looks at are coming the same way.
Yeah, that's so true. From the front of the docks.
That's right.
Yep.
Give him a change, make him look at it coming from a different angle,
Yeah. I'd be fishing the back of those docks. I know you mentioned it earlier. It's work going around to those backs of the docks, or that dock that's all the way in the back of the cove by itself. It sits way back in there, and you got to put that trolling motor on for 2 minutes to get back there to it. That's the one that 6-7 pounder might be on. You just got to put in the time and get back there.
I know it sounds weird, but I guarantee you're going to catch him most of the time where you didn't expect to catch one. And that, like I say, how many times have you been out there fishing? Well, heck, I didn't even expect to catch one when I threw it out there. Guess what?
Yeah.
That's because everybody went down the bank, didn't throw out there, and that's the way the big bass bash you got to think about, they ain't all going to be standing in there on that piece of brush because they can only look at so much.
All right, folks at home, here's the question for the $25 Baitworks giveaway. What was Dion's final day weight in the 97 Classic, and what lake was it on? So it's a 2-part question. You got to tell me the lake, and then I want to know his day 3 weight in pounds and ounces, not tenths and hundreds, pounds and ounces. So first one that guesses that gets $25 gift card from Baitworks.
God, I hope you got that stat because I really am not sure. I'm not sure I could win this prize, but
I got it written down. I mean, as long as the internet was all right, we're all right.
Just don't tell nobody till I get to make my guess because I think I know, but I'm I could be off by a little bit.
I got it written down.
Well,
There.
everybody's
doing their research
everybody's
right now.
using the Google machine right now. There
I
has
got
not
a
been a
deal.
single guess.
I got a deal that a lot of people don't realize about the Bassmasters Classic that I won. I never weighed in a largemouth bass.
Oh, really? Spots?
Never weighed one in. Caught all spotted bass.
Huh.
Now I had some in the boat, but I ended up culling them almost every day. I weighed in 15 spotted bass.
When you're fishing, we got a winner.
Yeah, we got a winner. First guess.
First guess.
Sweet.
There you go.
Who is it?
It is Corey Stout.
And
11 pounds, 12 ounces. Logan
How-
Martin Lake.
how much?
11 pounds, 12 ounces was your day 3 weight on Logan Martin.
Yay, way to go.
Good job, man. Corey, hit me up on Facebook and send me your email address, or you can get a hold of me on Instagram at 10 Horse Monty 6. So on Facebook, Gabe Montgomery Fishing, or 10 Horse Monty, and then on Instagram, 10 Horse Monty 6. And send me your email, and I'll get it over to Brian at Baitworks, and he'll get you a $25 electronic gift card out. He's usually like tomorrow. He's really on top of it.
Perfect.
And also, if you see the ticker running there across the bottom of the screen, use the code THM10 at Baitworks and get you 10% off of your first order. Baitworks is a great place to buy your big bash stuff. I mean, they got a pretty good selection.
And you'll have it by the bash.
You'll have it quick. Their shipping is really quick. It's, people that are in this area, it's right here.
They've got as cool a selection of stuff. I mean, the really nice thing about working with them is they've got the guys that keep up. They keep up with everything. They're at the Red Crest. They're at the Classic. They go everywhere. They read. They watch the stuff on TV. Their lure selection is second to none. As far as that goes, and it's all because they're young guys, and they're like you guys. They're on the internet. They know what's going on. And like I say, everybody needs somebody like that in their corner, because if you need that one little bait, they got it. All the popular stuff, stuff like that. I mean, they got it.
Yeah, it's a good company. They've come a long way, and
yes, absolutely.
They've got Boatworks is moving to in Truman, I guess, or aren't they trying to put it all in one area? Aren't they relocating, or did I hear that wrong?
They moved. They've actually kind of separated the tackle and the tackle and the boat some. Got a couple new locations and stuff. But,
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Tim says, do they have Chad shads? That's kind of one of those deals where you have to just check on the site every once in a while. A lot of that stuff.
Follow their Facebook page.
Yeah, follow their Facebook page. They do a really good job of keeping up to snuff on things.
And they got guys standing there that if you call them, they can tell you.
Yep.
I mean, they're very, very efficient at what they do. So just give them a call and they can tell you what they got.
Tell them Dion sent you.
I know. I call them all the time. I call them just to aggravate the heck out of them. Disguise my voice, ask for stupid stuff. I'm just kidding.
It's hard to prank call anymore. I remember the days when we could do that before we had caller ID. Caller ID.
That's right. Yeah.
It screwed everything up, man. Caller ID.
What's this person want?
Any tips on Chickamauga?
Chickamauga?
Yeah, Chickamauga.
I'm sure they're spawning there and being done spawning and stuff like that. Right now, they spawn quite a bit earlier than we do, but not way ahead because of the mountains. So it's still, they spawn up there pretty good in April. So I think that's what they're going to be doing somewhere right now, especially the way this moon was, just this last week.
Yeah. Throw a Cinco.
So
never go wrong with
it. You can't go wrong. I tell you what, the last time I was there, I throwed a shaky head on like 17-pound line, and it was like a 3/16, and I put a little brush hog on it and caught the stew out of them. I mean, and they were trying to spawn some, and I was just casting it around at docks and any piece of wood and stuff like that. But I mean, I throw the green pumpkin candy, brush hog type deal a lot. A little bit of chartreuse on tails. So
Tim says he's watched the classic rewind probably 100 times at least, and he says he remembers Dion talking about Guido's advice on the Coosa River spots. Son, they live under docks, so you'll catch them.
that was a fun time because, when I won down there, we'd already fished 2 of the classics there, and we'd done good in both. Me and Dad both had done well in almost all of them that went there. I'm riding in the, I didn't get to spend much time with Dad because he was working the show and I was fishing and they keep you in a motel room and it's they don't keep you. It's not like jail. But you stay in a big motel where you're not really accustomed to, and I kept thinking, man, I really need to just settle down and fish, and it was kind of funny. I needed another spinning rod. I realized I took 2 spinning rods, but the rest of my stuff was with the intentions of fishing deeper. And I'm standing there fixing to get on the elevator, and I've got a crankbait rod in my hand, and he looks at me. He's like, Dad walks up to the elevator and he says, "I'll ride up to the room with you." And he says, "I want to hear about how your day went." And he gets on, and I explained to him that what most people don't realize, the first day I spent till 1 o'clock without a fish, fishing deep, trying to catch them out deep and catch a big stringer or bass. And I had an old boy from St. Louis with me, a sports writer that I'd fished with, and pretty much every classic I ever fished, I've fished with him. And he said, "Hey, dude," he said, "you told me that you could go to the boat docks and catch your limit in an hour." He says, "Guess what? You now have 50 minutes. And I'm like, "Oh, I guess I better go catch my limit, huh?" And I went and caught my limit the first day. Second day, I went and caught my limit right off the get-go, and had them in about an hour. I had close to what I weighed in, and then I went back out deep, and I tried to catch them deep again most of the day, and I didn't get to talk to Dad, didn't get to see him, and you're not supposed to get info, so we avoided each other, and but he's finally riding in the elevator up to my room to see my kids more than anything. And I get on the elevator, and there he is. And he says, "What are you going to do with that?" And here I got a 7.5 foot crankbait rod with a big old crankbait on it. And I said, "Man," I said, "I need another spinning rod for tomorrow." And Dewey Kendrick, the tournament director, gets on the elevator on the next floor. And Dad says, "You need it really bad, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Let me see that pole." And Dad takes my fishing rod, and as the doors are closing, he just sticks that crankbait rod through the door of the elevator. And when he sticks it out, there's about 2 feet of it out the door, and the elevator closes, goes up, and it just broke it off. Put the rod half, and he turns around, and he looks at Dewey Kendrick, and he says, "Hey, he needs another fishing pole." He says, "I really did not mean to do that," And Dewey's like, "Yeah, right," And so then I could replace the rod. You couldn't get a new rod unless it needed to be replaced. And so, yeah, my dad got me another spinning rod for the last day. So he stuck mine in the elevator door. But, and that's just like I said, my dad didn't finish high school, but very, very sharp, Well, the rule reads, wait a minute here. Yeah. Yeah. Like I say, I'll never forget that as long as I live, watching that elevator door go snap. And he's like,
that's some really quick thinking.
Oh yeah, I would have never dreamed of thinking about that.
What was the limit in '97?
I think 7.
7 rods. 7
or 8 or something like that. And you think that's plenty. No, it's not. That's not. Not when you're fishing for that kind of money.
No.
And fishing for that kind of situation.
I mean, most guys got 30 rods in their boat nowadays.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, you think about it, on that fishery today, if you were to go down there and do the same thing that you were doing in '97, you'd have 7 or 8 spinning rods rigged up.
Yes, at least. Yeah, absolutely.
Probably, and half of them had the same bait on them.
Yep. And the neat thing about it was, think about what it would have been like back in the old days when you got 10 pounds of tackle.
Right.
Because that's the way it used to be. It used to be you had 10 pounds of tackle.
10
And
pounds.
the only other tackle you could get was what you could get from other competitors. You could swap with other competitors, but when you showed up, they weighed your tackle box and that's all you got. Hell, the first couple of classics I fished, they give you a tackle box. And if you couldn't get it in that tackle box, you could not carry it. There was guys showed up with these plain old boxes. It was one that was, I don't know, it was probably 2 feet tall, this box, and it had 4 or 5 drawers, and then it had a big open bottom in it. And there was guys would show up with with straps all the way around them because they're so tight with baits and stuff that the compartment lids wouldn't hold them shut. So that you'd have to take a belt and put around it just so your box would stay together. But needless to say, it was cool. You know, it's cool stuff. You know, now you get to use your own boat, and you know, back then you had to use their rig and, like say, 7 rods, limited tackle. You know, it was fun. You know, it was a very cool deal.
Yeah, your weight box weighs more than 10 pounds.
Huh?
Your weight box weighs more than 10 pounds.
Oh, I got no less than 5 jig boxes that weigh more than that in my boat right now. You know, yeah, it's pretty crazy, but you got by. You figured it out, you know, and you got by. But
well, I mean, you take a half-ounce jig.
Don't take many of them.
32 of them, and then you add some 3/4 in there.
Right.
I mean, that's just jigs. I mean, that's not sinkers, Carolina rig weights.
For a week at the Classic.
Yeah.
Yeah. You better have a plug knocker.
Thousand Islands, New York. If it hadn't been for Basil Bacon, my dad would have not had anything to throw the last day. He would have been completely out of jigs because of the pickerel, the pikes. You know, he was catching them around milfoil and stuff like that. And, you know, those pike and muskies and stuff, they could eat him down to where he had 2 jigs to go out the last day. And Basil said, I ain't even throwing a jig. He says, I'm throwing a spook the whole time. He said, here, take mine, you know. And he took about 10 jigs from Basil. And he finished 2nd or 3rd in that tournament. And when he got in, he had the jig on his fishing rod, the last one he had. So it's kind of cool.
Well, he didn't need 7 or 8 rods. He needed 1 rod. He just needed more jigs.
He just needed more jigs. You know, he needed more jigs. So
that's good stuff.
But yeah, the classics are always fun. You know, I've been fortunate enough to win one and do well in about all of them I've ever fished, and it's nothing more than my dad's attitude. You know, my dad told me, he says, guess what? Nobody cares what you catch, you know, for next year. He says it's all about the next 3 days. He said, you know, make it count, fish for the right ones or go home, you know. And the crazy thing about it is FLW championships, Bassmasters, that's always been the easiest tournament for me to fish. I mean, you know, you just kind of got to look past all the, you know, the hype and realize, guess what? There ain't no tomorrow. You got to catch them every day and you got to get it done. And, like I say, it was cool. It was easy for me, you know, to fish them, you know, just because, you know, you're swinging for the fence from the get-go. It's the ultimate bass tournament as far as I'm concerned, because, like I say, after the last day, nobody cares if you finish 2nd at all, and that's the way all tournaments should be. You know, if I can't win, I don't care if anybody knows I showed up. You know, and I realize that's not very good for the sponsorship wise, but trust me, they only remember one guy.
Yeah, that's true.
You guys are 2 educated fishermen. Who finished 2nd when I won?
Dalton Bobo.
Dalton Bobo. Yeah, and the only reason you knew that's because it was so close. And he was gonna be the first Federation. Yes. You know, first Federation guy. If not, you wouldn't have remembered him.
No, you're 100% right. Most classics, no, I don't remember.
Who finished 2nd last year?
I don't know.
See there, and I was there.
No, wait.
I watched it.
I do know. It was
Lester, wasn't it?
No. It was the guy from Alabama, younger guy, the poker player. What's his name?
Kyle Welcher.
Kyle Welcher. Yep. Jason Christie. Right. Kyle Welcher.
You're right. I sat and watched the whole deal, and it's just not easy, you know. And it's sad that you make it to a tournament like that, and really in the end, there can only be one guy. There's one King Dingling, and that's it, you know. it was very cool to watch that last year too, you know, because Jason Christie deserved to win. You know, he had done well there several times in the past, and you know, he really deserved to be that guy, you know, on that given day. You know, same way with Gussie. You know, Gussie this year, Gussie won that tournament, you know, and guess what? He won another tournament there. And you know, guess what? He does that style better than anybody else in that tournament.
Yep.
You know, so that's who's supposed to win. You know, when I won skipping under boat docks on Logan Martin Lake, guess what? The best guy I know doing it was not even in the tournament, and that was my dad. Everybody else, they can't do it as good as me, period. And I challenge anybody. You know, I wouldn't want to do that too loud because I got two boys that can cast as good as I can now. But the crazy thing about it is, at that given day, I felt like I was the best in the tournament at getting my bait back under those docks, you know. And are there young guys that can do it now? Yep, there absolutely is, you know. I still got to keep telling myself that I can do it better than everybody else, but there's a lot of guys can do it, you know. The FLW championship that I won, you know, I won that fishing a little jig in current. And guess what? My dad has won so many tidal water tournaments with a little jig out of the current and out of the tide. And I really felt like I won the FLW championship on the Red River because of that knowledge. You know, I knew how to pitch a 1/4 ounce jig in a heavy current, you know, and I knew where to place my bait. I knew how to fish the cover better than most, you know. So you know, that's why it happened.
You know Jack Huxa? Ever
Jack
heard of that guy?
Huxa? Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to do a podcast test with him tomorrow night.
All right.
What's he say?
He said you were talking to a living legend right here.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about a living legend, but I was damn sure related to one of them for a while. That's for sure. You know, my dad was, and the crazy thing about it is, you know, when they had the all-time angler debate, you know, when you go up against Ricky Klung and Kevin Van Dam, and you know, when Ricky Klung wins the all-time greatest angler debate, and he tells the sports writers, apparently you people never seen Guido in the late 80s. He said, because yeah, there was nobody beat him. And you know, and so, and that's pretty big stuff when a guy like that says, yeah, I'm not even close to what he was.
Yeah.
And
no kidding.
Guess what? I got to grow up with that. I followed that all over the world, you know, and got to fish with him, against him, and, you know, got to see that on a daily basis. And one of the greatest things about him was the sheer confidence, you know, and in what he did and how he did it, you know. You know, I sit here and I talk about the way I think about this fishing and stuff. That's the way my dad believed. You know, he didn't think. He knew that's the way fish acted, and he knew why they did it and stuff like that. And you know, that's just a confidence that you have to have in your ability. And you know, I never saw a man that was like that. You know, there's a lot of good fishermen, ton of good anglers out there, but I was never around. I've never been around one that had that kind of confidence like my dad did. You know, you would never know it to talk to him. You would never know it to talk to him. But when he went out there, you knew, my God, that's the guy to beat right there. I knew if I beat him on with any kind of regularity, I was going to beat everybody else too, you know. And like I say, I was fortunate enough to, you know, I had to seek medical help to beat my dad. And when I say that, I went to a sports psychiatrist, and because of Kenyon Hill, you know, Kenyon Hill went to one, and I went to the same gal 2 weeks before I won the Bassmasters Classic.
Huh.
How about that for weird?
Nice.
And she told me, and this little old gal read me like a book. It was scary. And I've never seen this woman before in my life, but she had read up on it. She had watched videos. She had watched videos on Dad and everything. And I walked in there and I sat down, and she asked me a few questions, and she says, do you see yourself beating your dad? And I said, nope, nobody can. And she says, guess what? He's not even in the tournament this week. And I said, well, I guess you're right. She says, so guess what? You got a chance. And I said, yep, I guess I do. And like I say, she helped me out with some thought processes and, and just, keeping my mind in the game all day long and made a difference. I won. I started winning. The other FLW championship that I won in 2000, guess who wasn't in it?
Really?
My dad was not in that one.
Huh.
And, can I say that I ever beat my dad? Yep, beat him right here one time real good. I won and he finished fourth. Have I beat him before? Absolutely. But it was really, it really kind of weighed on my mind, that he was the greatest. And, I wasn't supposed to be,
Wasn't there at one time when you guys were fishing 4 different circuits? And
in 89, in the 89-90 season, we were fishing 4 different circuits. We were fishing bass, bass, Redman Golden Blend, and 2 circuits of U.S. bass, an East and a Central division in U.S. bass. And in the 89 and 90 season, Dad won Angler of the Year in all 4. I mean, and that's fishing against the same guys that he fished against in bass forever, and in 90, the 90-91 season, he won Angler of the Year in 3 of them. And I won Angler of the Year in the Central Division of the U.S. Bass. And he never made a cast the last day of the last tournament, or he would have beat me there. But so, he would have won Angler of the Year in 4 different circuits, 2 years in a row. So,
dang.
And that wasn't the most impressive year as far as I'm concerned. The very next season was the most impressive one, is because he had a heart attack. We were up at Truman Lake pre-practicing for the BASS, the first tournament of the season, and he had a heart attack and he never fished. He spotted him the whole first tournament, never made a cast in the first tournament. And then at the last tournament of the season, he didn't catch a fish on the final day because I was the guy that he was going to knock out of the Classic. He was going to knock me out of the Classic. I was the man on the bubble, and he had already made up for missing 1 whole tournament and was going to knock me out of going to the Classic.
Wow.
And he never caught a fish on the last day. He didn't weigh one in, and that's because he thought he was going to knock me out. So that's impressive.
That's impressive.
To spot BASS caliber guys 4 days, spotted them 4 days and still was going to make the Classic. So that's pretty cool.
But he put you over himself. Like
yeah, absolutely.
That's just as impressive to me.
Yes. I mean, and how many times did he make it? How many times was he going to make it? And he just wanted to make sure that I was going to make it, So yeah, that was the impressive year to me, because I knew how hard it was. You can't spot them guys a day, not 1 day, and still expect to come back and make the championship. And yeah, he spotted them 4 whole days and still was like 2 spots out of going to the Classic.
You can't stumble at all.
No, that's amazing.
No, but it just, he was just a whale of a dude. I mean, he could just catch them, and he kept it simple. He kept it simple. When he'd go to some place that had different kind of food, he kind of paid attention to what the food was, how it acted a little bit, and just he'd figure it out. It just wouldn't take him too long at all, and he'd figure out, okay, well, those golden shiners act a lot like a shad, but they stand around grass. So, he figured it out, and didn't take him all day to do it. That's what was amazing. My dad, you hear about Van Dam having a 10-minute rule, puts his trolling motor down, he gives it 10 minutes. And if he doesn't do something, he changes. My dad's 10-minute rule was about 5 minutes. Something didn't happen pretty quick. He's going to do some changing until he figured it out, and it's crazy part about it is to be as methodical as he was at everything he did, he was still very fast. He was very speedy at how he how he worked out those little equations that some of us take a half a day to do. He does it in 30 minutes in the morning. Okay, this is what they're doing. And that's just the way it was. He's just awesome. And there's a lot of fishermen out there that are naturals. Really truly natural anglers. And then there's the rest of us. Yeah. And that list is very, very small, on who the actual natural anglers are. I'm not one of them. I'm a worker. I have to work at it. And not to say that he didn't work at it. He's very natural at it. It just came to him, and he let his instincts carry him, where you or I, will look at that bank and we'll think, oh man, that looks good. I'll stop and hit that. He did. He would make that stop. He'd stop, give it 10 minutes. Didn't work, he'd move on. Keep going. Go do what he had planned to. But if his gut told him to go try something, he did it. He went and tried it. And a lot of people can't do that. There's too much on the line. Oh, that's too. There's too many things weighing against you. Well, you're not going to win if you can't take that chance every now and then. That great something, I hadn't even been doing that, but I thought, wow, I ought to go try that. If you can't make yourself do that, you'll never have one of those wins that just blows your mind, like, man, I can't believe that just worked, and those are the ones that are really special to me, is those ones that you're sitting there at 10 o'clock and you're just failing miserably and you think, well, I'm just going to go try this. And you go try it and it works, and it just changes your whole day. That was something that guys like my dad, Ricky, Van Dam, very small list of people, Nixon, Nixon, just a super good, instinctive, natural angler, and the lucky part for me was I got to grow up and watch it. I got to watch all those guys, all my heroes, got to hang out with them, and fish against them, and like I say, the neat thing about it was I kind of had a knack for them championships. My dad told me long, long ago, he says, getting there is not the deal. Finishing is the deal. And you got to fish to win, and luckily enough, I got fortunate enough to do it a couple times, So fishing consistently, that's a huge deal to get there. Once you get there, forget about that consistent stuff. Just try to win. Fish
go for it.
Fish for big ones and make it happen. And a question.
One more question. We're gonna wrap her up. This is a really good question. What was the hardest part of tournament fishing for you to overcome? He says, I fished Bass Nation Junior Series, and for me, it's constantly wondering, what if?
You can't do that. You can't beat yourself up. And I hope this is the answer to your question. You really can't beat yourself up over stuff. You're going to fail. Just get that in the back of your mind. You're dealing with a live critter. You're not always going to be able to catch up with him. You're not always going to figure him out. There's so many variables that you have to work through and stuff like that. But you have to have confidence, and you just have to try things. Try new things. Try different things. I'm 55 years old, and I try to make myself learn something new every time I go out. And it's easy to get set in your ways, and really just, work at stuff that's, oh, well, that worked 10 years ago, that worked here, a few years back and stuff. You just have to fish by the seat of your pants every now and then, just like, I got nothing to lose. I'm going to really bust them, or I'm not. And go try to win, fish to win. Don't, my dad was always a big fish fisherman. And that rubbed off on me. I really like I would rather hold up 2 5-pounders than hold up a stringer that weighs 10 pounds. It's just more impressive. When people say that it's not about, impressing people, oh, they're bad wrong. I mean, because it is. It's about holding up a sack full that you can barely tote up the side of that tent, and get in there and like, wow, boy, people, look at these, that's what it's all about, is doing that. So fish for them, try to do it, so many things in fishing is a qualifier for the next day, or a qualifier for the next week, or a qualifier for the end of the year. And, to me, that's fun. That's all fine, well, and good. I was fortunate enough to make the Classic a few times and make the FLW Championship, several times. But still, you're not going to win unless you really get it in your head, hey, I'm going to fish to win this one. I'm going to try for big ones. I'm going to fish for big ones. But have confidence in yourself, your abilities. I think I'm decent at about everything I could do. Am I really, really good with a jig in my hand? Absolutely. And that's because I have all the confidence in the world. You being a junior angler, there's something you're good at, simple as that. There's something you two are good at, that you have more confidence than the next guy coming down the pike, my confidence lies in identifying stuff, looking out there and like, okay, this should be a crawdad eating day right here, and that just, it makes me feel good when I actually make it work, Them crawdads ought to be out crawling around on top of them rocks today, and getting down and rigging me up a little jig that actually makes that look good, makes it work, but fish with a lot of confidence, just don't let your day get away from you because you had a negative thought, or, oh man, it's 10 o'clock and I ain't got one. Don't look at it that way. Look at it, oh, well, it's 10 o'clock. I got 5 hours left, and that's the way, you have to look at it as a glass half full, all the time, Your last cast, this is one that my dad said, for his whole career, your last cast is as good as your first one, as long as you focus, Boy, that really hits close to home, doesn't it?
Yes,
as long as you can keep your focus,
yeah,
the last one's just as good as the first one, and that's if there's one thing that's different between me and John Q. Public, I think I'm going to catch one on my last cast, and if you go through all day long with that confidence, then you don't worry about catching 5, now this coming from a guy that caught 3 last weekend. But it happens. That's going to happen. You're going to get bit in the butt. You're dealing with an animal. That fish might have been looking the other direction, picking his nose when you throwed your jig in there.
Right.
You're going to have that happen, but it's going to happen. But then there's going to be those days when you can't make a bad cast. You go by a dock and you look back and you're like, oh, look at that little crack. And, instead of turning the boat around, you just kind of backhand it and it slides right in the hole, and your line jumps. You're going to have those days. When it's your turn to win, you can't screw it up. I mean, there's no way you can't screw it up. When it's not meant to be, just not meant to be. I don't care if you catch 25 pounds a day. Somebody's going to catch one bigger than you and they're going to beat you.
Yep.
You just got to go out there, do the best you can, stick with it, work hard at it. Like I say, there's natural anglers and there's guys that have to work at it. Let me tell you something. There's tons of us that have to work at it. And I'm no different than you guys. I'm no different than anybody that's called in on this show and said it. I'm no different than anybody else. I just have a lot of confidence and I keep at it. Like I say, when I'm out there fishing, I fully expect to catch one on my next cast. And that's something you got to keep in your mind. That's not an easy focus to keep, when you go 2 or 3 hours without a bite, and you take guys like Ricky Klung, it's all about the focus. Simple as that, make good casts. Every cast needs to be a good one. I hear guys say, well, I throw it out there. Boy, I can't believe I caught one out there. I don't know why I even throw it out there. I don't ever make that cast. Now, when I make a cast, it's with the intention of getting one, and you just got to keep that focus all day long, and keep moving. Have confidence in yourself, confident in what you're doing, and just move around, fish, think that you are the 900-pound gorilla of the day, And every now and then you're going to come out and you're going to load your boat on the trailer and you're going to know you're the 900-pound gorilla. It's going to happen for you. And when it does, nobody can take that away from you. When you outfish everybody, it's a pretty good feeling. And like I say, I've been lucky enough to do it a few times in my life, and I can remember every cast, for the most part when I did do it, so it happens. Just keep working at it. You'll get there. I'm living proof. Trust me. I mean, I'm living proof. But,
well, Tennessee Bassmaster, I don't think you could have got a better answer to a question. I mean, that was pretty good. Man. That's good stuff. And I agree with you 100%. It's about keeping a positive attitude, because you never know when that fish is going to bite. I mean, like you said, it only takes 5 casts. Those 5 casts could be the first 10 minutes of the tournament. They could be the last 10 minutes. They could be sprinkled somewhere in the middle of the day, and you don't know when that is. So you got to really focus and be paying attention and make good casts and pay attention.
It's a way to live your life too. Live your life with purpose, right?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do everything with intent and a reason behind it.
Whether it's your job, whether it's your work, it's your fun, whatever, your marriage. Give it all you got. That's the thing. Just try. Don't be lazy. Work at it. You ain't gonna get nowhere in life if you're lazy. I can tell you that right now. You gotta work at everything you do. And just makes you a better person too. I'm sitting here talking on 10-horse money.
That's right.
And I'm going to give it all I got. Every time, every question I get read to me, I'm going to try to give the best answer I can come up with. And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But in my mind, when I'm done with it, I gave them everything I had.
Yeah, we appreciate that, man. It's always good. You always bring the good stuff. Great stories, great conversation. You take time to answer questions.
A tiny bit of bullshit along the way makes life so much better.
That's what makes it special.
That's
That's
right.
what makes it special.
Right.
We didn't have to get our knee boots out tonight, so we wasn't too bad.
Well, I'll try harder next time.
There we go.
All right, let's wrap this up, man. This has been fun, man. Like we said earlier, thanks for coming on and hanging out with us and stuff.
You betcha.
Everybody out there, good luck at the Big Bass Bash if you're fishing it. Go check out Baitworks to get your supplies for the tournament, and anytime you need something, have a look over there. Great people, great folks. They do a great job. And Dion, man, take care. I'll probably see you. I'm fishing the Anglers in Action the next one, so maybe I'll bump into you down there in, I don't know, a couple weeks or so.
I'm actually working part-time at Bryant's Outdoors.
Are you?
Another little tackle store here on the lake. I'm in there 4 or 5 days a week. So come by and see me. We'll talk fishing.
Where's that at exactly?
It's in Laurie, Missouri. It's where I grew up. Laurie.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
So
yeah, stop in there and hang out with Dion.
You can buy your ticket to fishing the Big Bass Bash there and get your free T-shirt and be ready to go.
Any other shout outs before we wrap it up?
Nope. I'm good. I'll probably be over at Fitz's sometime or another for the Big Bass Bash. I try to go over there and help Robbie out and promote the lures and stuff a little bit. So, so come by and see us.
All right.
Sounds good.
All right. Same time, same place next week, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. And
thanks, Dion.
Till next time.
Thanks, guys.